126 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Kristen
and Catherine, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club, where we take one book a month and dive into all of the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, Catherine.
It's funny because we're doing like 3 books. It's 2 months, but it's like...
Yeah, it's like 3 books in 2 months, yeah.
We just completely lied in our intro, so just a heads up.
Oh, yeah.
Liars.
Yeah, we're not taking 1 book a month. I mean, yeah, no, this month we're doing 3, yeah.
3 books. True. 3 books in 2 months this one time. Yeah, so speaking of 3 books in 2 months, like we started last week, we're going to go through the stories in Assassin's Blade. And last week fit really well because we met up with Rolfe. And this week also fits really well because we get some of like Yrene's backstory and she like opens up about it. But like we also got her backstory in the story in Assassin's Blade because it's the assassin and the healer.
Yes, it is. And we actually get a description of her.
Oh, yeah.
Which
I glossed over it.
Last week we were discussing that. So
yes.
So it's just fun that this week we finally get her description.
Yeah.
So
that is funny. In a previous book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although someone else posted in like one of my book things, like, so I started Throne of Glass and I started with Assassin's Blade and now I'm reading Throne of Glass and I'm so glad I did. And I'm just like,
Not us.
Us.
I'm just happy with it the way I did it, so that's how she goes.
Yeah.
So I guess the assassin and the healer is where we first meet Yrene, and I kind of like that it's dual point of view, because I think I can't, like, the first story with Sam, we didn't have his point of view at all.
Right.
I don't know if there's any other stories with anyone else's point of view. Like, I haven't read it in a little bit, and I'm going story by story as we do this. So it'll be interesting to, like, keep an eye out for that. But this one literally goes from Irene's point of view to Aelin's point of view. So you can kind of already tell that she's going to be an important character, which is wild to, like, go from Assassin's Blade, which I don't know when it was actually published, but like this book came out ages later, and we're Tower of Dawn, we're finally getting this character's point of view again. It's like a bit wild how long it takes to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did think it was interesting that we were getting her point of view. It kind of is a clue, I guess, that she's going to be important again. Because there are other people, obviously, in Assassin's Blade that are important, but none of them get a point of view. And I think that's really telling of, like, what actually happens in Kingdom of Ash, even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like you said, the assassin and the healer. So, again, we're meeting Yrene for the first time, and it's her in Inish, which is where she was right before she went to the southern continent. And essentially, Selena Sartaq is staying at the inn that Yrene works at. She's beaten black and blue by Erawan, and now she's being sent away to train in the Red Desert with some assassin trainee. There's an assassin's, like, training camp in the Red Desert.
Yeah.
So she's being sent there as punishment for ruining Erawan's, like, slave
trade
deals in the last short story. And, like, long story short, she's really angry and really wants a fight, so she's, like, prowling around, and, like, Yrene had to close up the tavern all alone, so she's out in the alley, like, disposing of stuff. Some guys come upon her, they try and accost her and rob her, and Selena saves her life and gets hurt in the process, so Yrene heals her. Like, well, I say heals, like, in a very limited sense of the word.
In the same way that someone would patch you up in real life because we don't have magic too.
Yeah, like just patched her up, like put a bit of polysporin on on her wound, and then I guess Selena sort of like felt bad for her and like taught her these defensive techniques, made her like use them.
Which is exactly, but the defensive techniques are exactly the ones that like came up last week.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny.
The eye gouge.
I do like that.
Stomping on the instep. Don't let them take you to a secondary location. Yell fire. Yell fire. Anyway. And then I guess Selena sort of felt bad and left her money and this giant ruby brooch that she'd been wearing purely just to get attention because she wanted people to come and try and steal from her so she could fight them.
Yeah. She also says like she hated it. And it's funny because, like, I think in, like, one of the first few weeks, I don't know, we're on week 4 of 9, so before this moment in time of these books, Yrene did say that she, like, still has the brooch that the stranger gave her, and Selena in the book was like, I hate it. I hope someone tries to steal it so I can fight them. Yeah. And she's like, if they're good enough, I'll let them have it. Yeah. Which is just funny.
Anyway, so gives her money so that Yrene can get on the boat and go to Antica because she told Selena her story about how her mother was burned. She ran, wanted to be a healer, yada yada.
Yeah, and we get what's on the note now because I don't know if
I think we did. We did get it, yeah. But it
okay, yeah.
It's like for wherever you want to go, the world needs more healers or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's like what she lives by, which is so funny, and it's kind of like a moral thing because it's like you never know the impact you're having on someone else's life because like Selena's just there like angry and pissed, and she completely changes this person's life to the point that like how long later is this? Maybe a year and a half?
Yeah.
And she's still carrying around this piece of paper from this stranger, and it means so much to her. And you're like, we've been in Selena's head a bajillion times, and I don't know if she's ever thought of Yrene again.
Yeah. And
but it's just it's just interesting. Like I like the like you can change somebody's by being a nice person, by being helpful, you can like change somebody's path in life and like make their lives better. And obviously we don't all have a shit ton of money to be throwing at people, but you know.
Yeah. But well, and I guess she did. I do really like this story because even though we know that Selena is like, I think Selena is like, I think while maybe she never thinks of her again, she does, I think, make conscious decisions to go through with what she goes through instead of ulterior plans. So like in this book, or in this mini story, I guess, like Selena is discussing how maybe she would run away. Maybe, like, because Erawan sent her, like, to this shitty town to get on this boat to go to the Red Desert, and that's why she's there, because she has to get the boat to the Red Desert and be gone for a month.
Yeah.
But what's stopping her from, in her mind, what's stopping her from running away altogether? And just instead of getting the boat to the Red Desert, getting a boat to the southern continent and escaping there. Because he probably wouldn't be able to follow her there. And then when she's talking to Yrene and Yrene is telling her, like, she asks, she's like, if you did go to the Torchesme, what would you do? Like, once you became a healer, what would you do? And Yrene said, I go back to Fenharrow because, you know, it's the right thing to do. People need healers. And I think Yrene just sort of saying, like, that's the right thing to do. Like, they need healers there, so I want to go back. I think that really did impact Celaena to decide not to run away.
Yeah, because she'd never be able to help out in, like, any upcoming wars or anything if she ran away from him now. Like, you can't stay hidden if you're going to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, Celaena was very much like, you would come back to this empire? Like, this piece of shit, essentially.
Yeah.
And Yrene is just sort of like, yeah. And I think if she had run away to the southern continent, she wouldn't have just run away from her being an assassin. She would also run away from her history, her past of being Aelin, Ashriver, Galathinius, like future queen of, you know what I mean? Like, if she had run at this moment, she would officially be leaving all that behind. So I think that by doing what Erebin wanted her to do, it sort of kept her from abandoning that side of her.
Yeah.
So, like, maybe she doesn't actively think about Yrene, but I do think that her meeting Yrene sort of was, like, her almost, like, decision not to run.
Yeah.
And not to escape.
That makes sense. I guess the only other thing of the story that is, like, the overarching, like, love story is she doesn't know what happened to Sam. She was like, the shit was beat out of her. She was sent away, and she hasn't seen Sam at all. So, like, that is a fear that she's currently dealing with. Oh, and I guess when she tested Yrene in what she called a controlled environment, that's how she got the scar on her neck that Chaol always looks at. And it's kind of funny because Aelin Celaena was like, it's a controlled situation. Now, you knew you'd be fine. And, like, obviously Chaol's thinking that, like, it was a very traumatic situation for her.
Yeah.
Yes. But he's obviously thinking that it was, like, I don't know. I don't want to say worse, because obviously she thought it was bad. But, like, Celaena had her the whole time. Like, she would have been fine.
Yeah, so essentially, Celaena taught her all these moves. And then she got Yrene, like, so Celaena took out 4 guys, or 3 guys out of 4 guys. 1 guy ran away, got more of his buddies, and brought 4 buddies back, so there was 5 of them. Celaena could have fought them all off quite easily, but she, for a control environment, wanted Yrene to use what she had learned in the defensive, like, I say, like, a minute. She, like, literally taught her something in a minute, and then was like, I want to see how she can use this. So, like, taught her something, and then was like, how can she use this? So, like, purposefully, almost, I want to say purposefully, let the guy grab her and hold a knife to her neck, and was like, use what I taught you. Yeah. And then afterwards, Yrene was like, you could have taken him out. Why on earth did you do that? And she was like, yeah, because I could have taken him out and you were safe.
Yeah. Which I just find it funny that Chaol's always like, oh my god, her neck. Yeah. And it's like,
the poor thing.
Aelin did it on purpose. Yeah. Which is like, they both have scars from her. Is funny too.
Well, his is quite a bit worse, I think.
Yes.
Anyway.
But yeah.
That's the Assassin and the Healer.
Yeah.
Next week, it is the Assassin and the desert. Ooh. I actually do think, though, that one is probably one of the shorter ones. Because the
Assassin and the Healer?
Yeah, Assassin and the Pirate Lord is like 75 pages. And the Assassin and the Healer is only maybe 50.
Yeah, it's a much shorter one.
And then the other 2 are like 100 pages apiece. So that was a short one.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into it now. It's week 4. We are reading Tower of Dawn chapters 18 to 27 and Empire of Storms chapters 24 to 29. Obviously not in that order. We're breaking it up in the tandem read. You can have a look at the description in the description that we've got for this episode to see what order we read everything in. So last week, just to, I guess, get everybody up to speed, I'm going to say start with Chaol and Yrene. They're starting a little bit to bridge the gap. Right? He is helping her train some of the other acolytes in defensive techniques. Healing, sort of, they haven't really made any headway with, but person-wise, like, they're starting to sort of bridge a gap between the two of them. Like, maybe she doesn't hate him as much as she did.
Yeah, didn't you say last week, like, she decides to trust him or something, and we're like, wait, why? What?
Something like that. I think she, like, makes the decision that, like, he was young when everything happened, and, you know.
Yeah.
So that's them. Sartaq and Nesryn are getting closer, having secret meetings on top of rooks and, like, making everybody speculate on things.
Which is funny because, like...
That's why they did it, so that nobody would speculate on anything.
Well, yes, but also, like, I think it's funny that we're so much more attracted to that relationship because that one is progressing much slower.
Yeah.
And, like, the main one in the book is obviously not this one, but we're like, I can feel it.
Yep. What else we got? We didn't really get a lot with Aelin, Aedion, and Lysandra last week. Like, I don't know if we had anything.
It was just, would have been your part, because my entire part last week was just Manon and her insane
No, I didn't have anything.
Then there was none. And I don't know what happened the week before, because... Oh, the week before was
the week before was Ilium.
Yeah.
So last week was nothing.
Yeah. So we haven't seen them in a while.
Elid and Lorcan have joined up with a traveling carnival to sort of travel unnoticed by their enemies, which is fun. Manon got gutted by her grandmother and sort of took off, and she's dying because she's like a little gutted fish, apparently, and like her insides are becoming her outsides, which is bad. And yeah, she's not the wing leader anymore, and her 13 are God knows where.
Oh, and she's a Kraken.
Oh, and she's the Kraken Queen, the lost Kraken Queen. Killed her half-sister by accident. Not by accident, on purpose. Didn't know it was her half-sister at the time.
Yeah.
And Rowan and Dorian finally got to Skulls Bay, and two of Rowan's BFFs show up, Fenris and Gavriel. Rowan tries to ask them to work with him. They're about to say no when Rowan is like, Gavriel, if you don't, you'll never see your son. But so Gavriel's like, oh, okay. So then I guess the decision is sort of made that they'll stick around because he wants to meet his son, Aedion. I think that's...
Blackmail.
I love a bit of blackmail.
Yeah.
So I think that's everybody. It's so hard to keep track.
Oh, did you talk about... Yes. Never mind, you did. Sorry. My brain. You're good. Good job.
Okay. So we are starting with Tower of Dawn, chapters 18 to 21. Where we exactly left off Chaol and Yrene, Yrene sort of took a different technique in healing him this time around and sort of followed his pain instead of attacking the darkness head on. So by following his pain and suffering and sort of throwing her healing at that, it caused Chaol to be able to move his little toesies. So this is where we start. He's moving around his little toesies. He's wiggling them, and he can control the wiggle, which is great. And she was like, oh, maybe by finding you in the dark and, like, throwing my magic at the dark thing there is what did it. And I'm like, duh. Like, of course that's what did it. Like, what else did she think did it?
Yeah.
Anyway. she orders him to, like, do some exercises before they stop for the day. And she thinks about how, like, so last week, again, she told him right before she started healing him with the immense amounts of pain, she told him about her mother and what happened to her mother. So she thinks that the only other person she ever told about her mother was Hafiza when she got to the Torre. But didn't she tell Selena in the Assassin's Blade? Or did she just... I thought she did.
Yeah, she at least said that her mother had died.
I think she just said that she lost her 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Okay, so fine. She didn't. So I guess this is sort of our moment of look, they're getting closer. She's telling him things she hasn't told, like, anybody else. Mm-hmm. Sort of what that's trying to do.
Like, she's done, I don't know. I feel like she's just done so many healings. Like, she's done a hard healing like this before. I get that the whole point is, like, Hafiza's like, you need to heal yourself too. Mm-hmm. And I guess this is maybe the first bad guy that she's ever had to heal. Mm-hmm. So, like, I guess it's bringing up stuff, but it's just...
What makes him different?
Yeah, well, obviously, that's the point. Crack the book over my knee. Yeah, I guess that's the point. That he's different.
Yeah. But, like, she barely knows him, so why is she deciding that he's different?
Yeah, because fate.
God only knows. Yeah. Anyway, so she offers to order some food for them before they start doing the exercises, because I guess when she says exercises, it's not him doing them by himself. It's her exercising his muscles and his legs to get, because they're starting to atrophy. And she asked if she could use his bathing chamber and borrow some clothes, because her dress was covered in blood, because when she came out of the healing, her, like, face was bleeding. And 2, she is still wearing that friggin' dress from yesterday that she spilled food all over. So, like, she's a mess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he was watching her with this, like, really focused, calm face, and she was like, I haven't seen that look before. I haven't met this version of him yet. And I'm just like, you haven't met the calm version of him? It was just weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she went into the bathroom all lightheaded and smiley and told herself it was from blood loss. Ugh.
Yeah.
So, like, what? Him being able to move his toes, like, meant that they're, like, I just don't understand. What happened to make her lightheaded and smiley at their, like, what interaction did they have?
I guess he's handsome.
It's the only thing that makes sense. Anyway, so later on, like, way later, she's in Hasar's room, having been summoned after Hasar learned she was healing Chaol all day. So, like, they literally went from teaching at dawn, going back to his room, healing for, like, 3 to 5 hours, eating, and now Hasar's like, get in here!
Yeah.
And she says she was feeling neglected by Yrene. And we sort of learn, like, a little backstory here that they became friends because Hasar came back from an ocean voyage and got really sick with a really, really big tapeworm. And Hafiza had to, like, pull it out, which is disgusting. And Yrene, I guess, told Hasar stories of her life, including the one that we just did, the assassin and the healer, told her that story.
Hilarious.
And I guess it bonded them in some way, and Hasar thought they were friends, even though she doesn't really treat her like a friend, but more like a hired friend.
Yes.
Right? Anyway, so now whenever Hasar's in town, because again, it's not often, because she's off with the Armada, like the fleet, she's the ocean princess. So whenever she's in town, she wants to hang out with Yrene. However, according to Yrene, Hasar's lover, Renya, is actually more pleasant than the two of them. But Hasar kept her away from everyone so that attention stays on Hasar. Which sort of, I don't like. Like, I remember thinking that I liked Hasar when I first started reading this book. Because I remember Hasar. And I'm like, oh, Hasar, I liked her. And now I'm reading it again and I'm like, I don't think I do like her.
She's a bit of a mean girl.
She is. She's a bit of a bitch.
Yeah.
And not even a bit. Quite a bit.
Yes, a lot.
Like a lot.
Especially like at the end of Tower of Dawn, you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. Which is fun. And maybe I just literally forgot so much about this book that's why
I know, but
I thought I liked her.
When I first read Kingdom of Ash, I remembered liking her. And I think I liked her. I think I liked her in Kingdom of Ash. And then in rereads, you skip this book, so you skip most of the bitchiness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's what happened.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she sort of insinuates that Yrene is wearing Chaol's clothes because she has to borrow them because her dress was filthy. So, like, people might think they're having sexy times. Which is, like, I think valid. She's literally spending hours in his room and then comes out wearing 100%. His clothes. I think it's valid for people to be like, ooh. Plus, she's sending his servant away and, like, making her go get random things.
Yeah.
So, like, and seemingly not using them afterwards. So, you know, I think it's a valid assumption, to be fair.
Yeah.
Then Hasar asks if Yrene is actually interested in him. And she's like, no. She was like, 1, he's my patient. And 2, he's involved with Nesryn. And I'm just sort of like, 2 is not a reason.
Yeah.
Like, that's a reason why you're not acting on it. That's not a reason to not like someone. Yeah. And of course I say this with the utmost respect. But, like,
You can have crushes on people.
Yeah, you can have a thing for someone, but if they're in a relationship, obviously you don't act on it unless they're dicks and come on to you first. And then, you know, you show what a cheating a-hole they are.
Yeah.
But, like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously if you have an unrequited thing for someone, if you leave that as unrequited and don't do anything about it, like, you can't control that.
Yeah.
But, like, that's not a reason not to like someone. It's just a reason not to act on your feelings. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think this is a valid... I think the patient thing is a valid reason. I think...
Where did it go? Where did it go?
I mean, it doesn't change anything. My thoughts on the matter, but...
Yeah.
So, Hasar then asks about Cashin. Why they couldn't make a go of it. And Yrene is like, because if you're made Kagan, I don't know.
Kagan, I think.
Kagan, then...
Like a cog.
A cog in a wheel. But if Hasar was made Kagan, then she could have them killed. And Hasar's like, I would only kill my brother if he wouldn't submit. I'd let you live.
Yeah, I'd make you barren, though.
Yeah.
Not barren.
Yeah, she said...
Is that the right way to say it?
She said she would let now, quote unquote, let Yrene take the cleansing to ensure she has no children after her bloodline is secured. So essentially, I would only kill my brother if he just didn't let me rule.
Yeah.
But, and also... you wouldn't be able to have kids, obviously. So, like, it's sort of like a backhanded, like, I don't know. It's like, oh, don't worry, I'd let you live. However.
Yeah.
It's just not a great however. Anyway. Yrene then sort of asked, like, well, then, what are your plans for securing your bloodline? Because you're with a woman. 2 women can't make babies. And then Hasar's like, that's none of your business.
Very forward.
But, like...
It is also very forward.
But she literally was just... But is it, though? If it's one of your friends, And you're talking about...
but they're not friends. And Yrene knows that they're not friends.
I guess. In my head, like, if Hasar says, we're friends, I missed you. Yeah. And then talking about, I need to secure my bloodline. And then your friend says, how do you plan on doing that exactly? For her to be like, that's none of your business. And, like, sort of snap at her is sort of like, whoa, you brought it up. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah.
I just thought it was okay. Like, sudden. Anyway. So, Yrene they changed the subject then. And Hasar asks about the attack that happened at the Torre Chesme. And assures Yrene that when she finds who killed this healer thinking it was Yrene, she's gonna behead them. And Yrene sort of makes like a comment in her head that like that's sort of the best part about Hasar is that she's extremely loyal. And I can't remember if this is sort of like an out loud comment or a comment in Irene's head. I just wrote it down. But she sort of wonders if Chaol and Nesryn brought the threat on purpose. And I don't remember if that's a Hasar comment or if that's a Yrene thought.
It is. I think it's a Hasar comment. I think she's like, well, they are probably trying to scare us. Like, I think she was saying they're probably trying to scare us into joining the war.
Right. Anyway, then she goes a little bit further and shows Yrene a map of enemies, like, in the northern continent where all the stuff is taking place, and says that like Aelin is unaccounted for, and she thinks that Chaol knows how to play quote unquote the game. So like I think she thinks that Chaol is a lot more conniving and manipulative than he actually is. Like she's giving him way more credit. And she wants Yrene to learn where Aelin is from Chaol, and like kind of threatens her, like says like, you know, I control the armadas, so like sort of insinuates that Yrene plans to leave and she can make it so that doesn't happen, which is another bitchy thing. Yes, they're friends. Sure. And she sort of so this is what I mean. She says like, she sort of says, because Irene's like, I'm not going to do that. And Hasar's like, what can I do for you? Like, what can I give you? And Irene's like, I have everything I need. Like, I don't need anything from you. And Hasar's like, I control the armadas. I could make crossing the Narrow Sea very difficult. So, like, essentially might plan to forbid her not to leave, which could, you know, crash her plans. So she agrees to learn what she can. And Hasar says, great, join us for the Tahome feast in 2 days. And she would, and Irene's like, as long as you don't mind me wearing the same dress I wore to dinner the other night, because that's my only good dress. And Hasar's like, don't worry, I got you.
Which is nice.
Yeah. I guess. After threatening her and forcing her and it's not even bribery, it's, what would you call blackmailing her to do what she wants her to do?
So much blackmail.
Yeah. She's like, I'll get you an outfit. So, apparently this festival for Tahome, she's the sea goddess. So everybody would be celebrating. Then we move to Chaol's point of view. He is really excited to be able to move his toes.
That's fair.
Yeah. And so much so that when Nesryn comes back, he's very happy and giddy. So he hauls her on his lap and he kisses her. And he said there was no heat or feeling in it, but wasn't surprised since he'd been pushing her away lately. And I'm like, there's no heat or feeling in it. And yet, like, it's just bizarre to me. Like, if you feel nothing, why are you still pursuing this relationship? I feel it's just guilt on both sides. Yes. Like, they feel like they're like, we said we would try something, so we should try something, even though they don't feel anything for each other. Anyway. That night at dinner, the Coggin wasn't there. He was having dinner with his wife, who was still mourning. But all it meant for Chaol was that he can't ask for a private audience. He also neglected to tell Nesryn about his toes. So even though he was really excited about it, and he kissed her, he didn't tell her, hey, I can wiggle my toes. Which is, anyway, he just went to bed instead. Next morning, he woke up really early. He was really eager to start, but Yrene didn't show. So he went out into the courtyard and saw the horse he rode yesterday was there. And he asked the guard from yesterday, Shen, to help him up. Then he waited on the horse for another hour. So he just sat on the horse in the courtyard for an hour? Like, rude for that poor horse. Before heading to the Torre to see, like, what was going on, like, where Yrene was. Yeah. And he got there, and he looked at the guards and smiled at them and sort of, like, nodded his head, sort of in solidarity, like, yeah, I know what that means to be a guard. But then he felt immediately guilty because, you know, as we all know, he's suffering and he's guilty over the loss of his men. So, like, obviously him smiling, he's like, oh, no, can't be happy, my men. He sees Hafiza in the courtyard, and he's like, hey, where's Yrene? And a healer next to Hafiza said, oh, she's still asleep. Like, on her way home, she fell asleep in the carriage, and we had to put her to bed. And Hafiza just tells him, like, their magic can do great things, but it comes at a cost. And she's like, don't worry about it. Like, she'll be fine. She just needs to sleep it off. And he says, well, then tell her to take tomorrow off, too, because it's a holiday. And I'm just like, are you her boss now? You can't tell her to take the day off. You don't employ her. You're not paying her. I just got mad. Anyway. So.
It's fine.
And then Hafiza's like, you obviously don't know Yrene very well if you think she's going to take a day off just because it's a holiday, which is funny.
Yeah.
So he sees that they're, like, headed out. So he offers to escort them where they need to go, and Hafiza agrees. So he, like, trots on his horse while they're on the walking. And then they get where they need to go, and he's like, okay, peace, and leaves.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Yrene's point of view. Back to her. So, she's sleeping. She was sleeping all night. She literally slept all day, and, like, half through the night, like, woke up for something to eat and went back to bed, like, but she's good now. So, like, she knows that this is going to be a hard healing. Like, she knows it's going to take a lot out of her because she worked on him for 3 hours, got his little toesies wiggling, his little piggies, and gave herself a nosebleed and was out for a day and a half. So, like, she knows it's going to be hard. It's going to be a long one.
This healing's going to be fucked.
Yeah. So, she goes down to the courtyard and finds Chaol's already there waiting for her. And he's got an extra horse. And he just asks, like, if she got the rest she needed. And she's just annoyed by him, who's a dude, butting his nose where it doesn't belong. She doesn't want him to care about her well-being. And I'm like, great. It's a great job, Yrene. But I love it.
Yeah. Like, of course, anybody would care if it's their fault that you had to sleep for a day and a half.
Yes!
Like, that's not just, oh, he's being an alpha hole or whatever the fuck we call it. It's more like...
He's just being a compassionate human being.
Yeah.
The first time ever.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know that's not true, but I want to say it.
That's fair. You say your truth, which is not a truth.
My twisted version. Anyway, so he, like, teases her for a bit about stuff. She doesn't appreciate it, but she gets over it. And she just tells him, like, she has to make a stop and visit another patient before they go back to the palace and treat him. And he's like, that's fine. How about I come with you? And I guess, like, valid. He's used to being able to come and go as he pleases. And now he's in a sort of trapped in a palace. So he just wanted to get out and about for a bit.
Yeah.
So she does some leg exercises with him on the horse for some reason first. And tells him about the person on the steps that she healed with the horse injury. And that brings up Caution. And he just sort of says, like, the guy seems great. Like, what? Why? And she just tells him she didn't feel strongly enough to give up her dream of returning to Fenharrow, which is valid.
Oh, 100%.
Like, I feel like so often women are the ones that have to give up their days, like their dreams and their hopes. Their jobs.
They're the ones that have to move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to give up all of that for a man. And Yrene is saying here, I didn't care enough to give up my dream. Perfect answer.
Yeah.
Is she gonna care about Chaol enough to give up her dream? I wonder.
Well, no, because she doesn't have to.
No, I know, but still.
But yeah.
Anyway, he's glad because who else would bark orders at him? Like, what? What does her being with Caution and giving up Fenharrow have to do with her barking orders at him? I don't know. I don't get it. But it's a cute little exchange, and it's just showing that they're becoming easier and more comfortable with each other. So, back to Chaol's point of view. They go to this old lady's house, and there's an old man there, and he's coughing a lot. And Chaol just, like, stands outside the house on his horse. Poor horse is getting, like, the worst out of this. And Yrene goes inside and heals the old man. I guess Chaol can see in through a window and sees that he's got like sores on his body. And she comes back out and she's a little sad because the disease is one that keeps coming back over and over again. And she's like just buying him time. She can't heal him all the way. So she offers to go back to the palace now. And he's like, if you have other patients to see, like, let's go. Because he likes being outside.
Yeah.
So then they visit a young mother who had a difficult birth a couple weeks ago. And when they get there, he thinks that, like, the little, like, part of town they're in reminds him of Rifthold, except it's brighter and happier. And, of course, you know, he sees her interacting with the baby. So that's something that obviously goes into his head. But, like, him and Yrene have a brief conversation about spies, how the Coggin finds, like, willing spies in other countries that suppress other deities. So, essentially, he finds spies by finding, like, minorities and getting them to spy for him. And then Yrene asks if he's ever had a spy network. And that's sort of info for Hussar. And of course, no is the answer. He doesn't. He's not smart. Yeah. He's not smart enough for that. But I think
he was a fucking child.
But I also think that that's not everybody has to be really smart in this book.
No.
Like, I'm sorry. Aelin is super smart. Dorian is super smart. Rowan is super smart. Like, not everyone's the smart one. Yeah. Chaol's not the smart one.
No.
I don't know what.
Why is he?
I don't know what his role is, because he's also not the pretty one.
Well, everyone keeps saying how handsome he is.
But he's not the prettiest.
No, but how can you be when Rowan's around?
Exactly. So, you know, I don't know what role he fills. He's not the smart one.
No.
So, like, he wouldn't have even thought of having a spy network as captain of the guard.
It's because he was a child.
Anyway, they're visiting with the mother, and Yrene is bright and happy, and Chaol thinks he's never seen someone more beautiful.
That's not good.
Not the mother, Yrene.
I know, but he has a girlfriend.
It's true. So the woman sort of asks, like, when she can have sex again, and makes a joke that Yrene should, since she can't, Because Yrene's like, no, it's been 2 weeks. No, wait another month, please. So, like, insinuates, oh, look, you should with that handsome guy. And Yrene's flat out, no. But then they leave. And Chaol teases her about the firm no. Like, because I guess she did it loud enough for Chaol to hear. And, like, Chaol heard that whole interaction. And he sort of suggests, like, that he can still pleasure a woman. Just this whole conversation I find really awkward.
Yeah, it's fair.
He's like, I can still pleasure a woman. And she's like, you have a girlfriend?
Yeah.
And you're my...
Did you forget about her?
And you're my patient. So, like, you know, that's sort of why. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. It's just sort of like, Chaol, man. Like, dude. Why? Anyway, she sort of says, like, it's a bit late to heal you because we've got the dinner party tonight and I worry that we'll lose too much time. So, like, maybe we shouldn't heal you today. So she's like...
So she wants a day off?
Yeah, right? Although it's not a day off. It's just a day off from him.
Yeah.
Not a day off from everybody.
I want one, too.
God. Anyway, so she's like, how about I give you a tour of the city instead? And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. So they go around all afternoon, and they go to, like, this public garden-y courtyard sort of a space. And Yrene asks him if he thinks they can have a place like this on their continent. Because it's, like, a really peaceful, beautiful, sort of, like, outdoor space in the middle of, like, a bustling city. And he thinks then of Nehemia because Ylwe was supposed to have been beautiful before Erawan, and thinks of something Aedion said that he has to believe there's somewhere better. And he says that if they survive the war, then yes, they can make something beautiful like this.
Hope.
Yeah, hope. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And Yrene sort of understands then that he does love his people very much. And she's about to say something else, but then doesn't. And I don't know what it was she was going to say. But says instead that the people of Fenharrow were not blameless with their actions during this past decade. Essentially, like, saying he's not to blame for all the shitty stuff that went on in Fenharrow. And I'm like... It's not...
He was 11, too.
But also, like, I feel like absolving him of blame. Yes, when he was 11, obviously when her mother was killed, absolutely not his fault. But when he became captain of the guard and he blatantly ignored the things that the king did, I think there is a certain level of blame he needs to take. Do I think there was much he could do about it? No, because it was a Valg prince inhabiting a king's body. What could he have done as a 19, 20-year-old guy? Not very much. But I do think the fact that he took a step back and let the king sort of do what he wanted and terrorize a continent of people, I think there is a certain level of blame that he needs to take and say, I did nothing. So therefore, a part of the blame, he deserves a little small part of blame for not doing anything. Even though I'm aware there's not much he could have done, but just not vocalizing and at least trying to speak up.
Well, it's not even just that, because, like, even in the first book, we get that, like, he meets Aelin, and he's like, you're a slave, you're a piece of shit. And she's like, well, I'm actually just a person. And then he's like, oh, I guess not everyone in here is a piece of shit. Like, he was brainwashed. Like, but that's not good enough of a reason either. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, he was manipulated, and obviously he was young, but it's like, after that, after he realized in Throne of Glass, he should have done more.
Yeah.
He should have done anything. Like, Crown of Midnight, she was like, I'm not actually killing the people. Yeah. And he was like, what the fuck? You can't tell me that. And she's like, well, you were pissed that I was killing people.
Yeah.
So, like, there's just so much.
Yeah. So, it bothers me that her is, like, being like, well, you know, even Fenharrow weren't blameless. It's sort of like trying to, like, say it's not your fault when a little bit of it is.
Yeah.
And, like, I know
I think that is this book.
Like, I know he has a shit ton of healing to do, and I know he has a ton of other things on his, like, metaphorical plate of things to feel guilty about, but I think him standing by while the king tortures thousands of people should be one of the things that he feels guilty for. I don't think he should be relieved of that duty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think her saying that, I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah. I just am never going to be able to get over the fact that I think it's stupid that we made the captain of the guard this young.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think it makes any sense at all. And I get, like, I don't know.
Isn't he, like, 23? I know it's too young even still, but, like, he's not, like, 18 and, like,
he'd never killed anybody before. Which, like, not that you need to kill somebody to be captain of the guard, but you'd think you'd have to go away to war. Like, there's an active war happening. They're actively conquering places. Wouldn't you send your soldiers away for some, like, active duty before you make them captain of the guard?
I think.
Like, it makes no sense. I think it's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm here for it. I agree. Anyway, so back to this, I guess. They go back to the palace, and Yrene goes to, like, find her outfit from Hussar, and, like, Chaol goes to get a bath and change. Nesryn comes back mid-bath, but, like, they don't really say anything to each other. She just goes to her room to get ready. And Chaol thinks that he hasn't seen her captain's uniform in days. And I feel like that's telling, because in my head I'm thinking he must want her to wear it because he wore it all the time.
Well, and just like
as a recognition of her status.
Yeah, and that's her job. That's why they're there. So he's like, is she still here for the same reasons, or is she here for her family? Which, like, she is also. So,
anyway, so I guess he didn't say anything about her not wearing her uniform, but says instead, like, you look pretty. And she noticed that he had some sun, so sort of said, oh, you went outside. However, he purposely chose to stay behind when she went to visit her family so that he could get healed. And then he ended up spending the day outside with Yrene. So, like, she sort of noticed, hey, you went outside today. He's like, yeah, I did. But, like, he was like, sorry, I can't meet your family today.
Yeah.
But he could go hang out with Yrene. Anyway.
Yeah.
But she didn't say anything. And he still doesn't tell her about his toes that are still wiggling. Not constantly. They're not constantly wiggling. He can wiggle them when he chooses. So they go to the feast, and the Coggin and his wife are still not there. They're still grieving. Yrene walks in, and everyone is staring at her, including Chaol, because she's, like, really hot to trot, showing off her assets. So Chaol sort of recognizes that, like, she's actually the Healer on High's heir, so, like, she wields considerable influence and power, even though she doesn't act like it. But Argan recognizes it. So, like, he's sort of thinking maybe something will happen here. Yrene doesn't look happy. She just looks really resigned. And we find out why almost immediately, because Hussar comes over to where Chaol and Nesryn are sitting and very rudely tells Nesryn to move. It's like, it's rude to always sit with your companion. We've let it go on too long. Move.
It's like, Pride and Prejudice 2005.
Yes! It is. And, like, Sartaq very graciously is like, Nesryn, come sit by me. And then forces a vizier to move. So, like, let's just be rude to everybody. If you want people sitting in a certain place, you should get place cards.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, Yrene then is forced to sit next to Chaol. So, we sort of see the Hussar is, like, plotting. And wants them sitting together so she can get information. Chaol just says, like, do I even want to know? And Irene's like, nope. And they talk of little things like his feet, and like she's like, how's the healing? Like, how are your feet? Still wiggly? He's like, yep, going good. And she sort of subtly implies that she needs to be seen with it. Like, Hussar needs to see them talking together. So they finally have dessert, and the party starts, and like the party goes a little wild. There's dancers painted in gold, and they're wearing this, like, gauzy fabric. Very much a la Court of Nightmares, I feel like.
Yeah. They'd get along.
Yeah, and, like, nothing else. Just this gauzy fabric. There are musicians and cushions, and there's bowls of smoke, like, that are mild opiates set up, like, strategically around the room. And Duva's like, oh, this isn't good for my baby. Peace out. And leaves with her husband. And Sartaq and Nesryn decide they're going to set up a couple chairs away from the smoke, but still able to watch the dancers. She's, like, loving it. Argan sets up alone at some cushions with smoke. He's here for it. His wife is nowhere to be seen.
Don't matter to him.
No, Hussar sets up in another area with Renya, and they start just instantly making out with each other. And it's sort of like insinuation is that eventually people will, like, break off and go back to their rooms for sexy times. And, like, the smoke is sort of like an uninhibitor. Like,
an aphrodisiac.
Well, yeah, it just, like, releases your inhibitions and sort of makes you a little more easy-breezy. So, like, they're sitting, and Yrene is taking a million years to finish her dessert, and, like, everybody else has left the table, except for her, Chaol, and Caution. And, and Chaol hasn't moved from the table, because he's waiting for Yrene to move so that he can accompany her wherever she goes. And she's, like, playing with her dessert, because she doesn't want to get up, because she doesn't want to go sit with him. So...
She doesn't want to sit with either of them. It's so
awkward. She doesn't want to sit with Caution for personal reasons. She doesn't want to sit with Chaol because Hussar wants her to ply him for information. But, like, it's hella awkward. And, like, this is sort of what I mean. Like, she told Caution to back off, and he's still being a bit dickish.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
But, like, I don't know. I guess he was gonna say, hey, do you want to? But, like, Chaol's like, nope, you come with me. But he doesn't come over after and be like, I was gonna ask you.
No, he doesn't. But just the fact that he's, like, making her uncomfortable by, like, hovering, waiting for her to get up only so he could be like, sit with me. It's just, you're trying too hard, dude. Back off. Anyway, so Chaol tells her, like, that he would like to sit with her, knowing it puts a target on his back with Caution. But, again, she told him earlier that they need to be seen talking to each other. And so it also sort of saves her. And she's like, oh, yes, thank you. So they settle on a couch, like, away from the opiates, because neither of them are really into it. And Chaol questions the actions of the servants and is like, you know, like, because I guess some of the viziers, the lords and ladies, like, the nobility, you know, the servants are dancing and they're going to go home with people tonight. And they're going to, you know, engage in sexy times. So Chaol's sort of like, I guess, questioning that.
The consent
aspect. And Yrene sort of tells him that, like, the servants are eager to raise their position by going home with people. So, like, it's not true consent because they're only doing it to sort of get a higher status. But the cognate makes sure that there's an age restriction. So, like, you have to be a certain age in order to engage in this sort of servant. And there has to be vocal consent. And even the royals obey those rules, which we've heard a couple of times already. Then they sit and talk, and they almost, like, it's like they have to talk in riddles, but, like, through vague insinuations. And Yrene manages to tell Chaol that Hasar wants info on Aelin without specifically stating that. And wants info on where Aelin might be, which is news to Chaol, because Chaol's like, isn't she in Terrasen?
Yeah.
But she also manages to tell him that she's being threatened to get this info. And Hasar is sort of worried about Aelin and thinks that, like, they planned the attack at the library. So, like, manages to say all of this through very vague insinuations and sort of, like, code words. And all this time they are talking, they sort of have to act like they're having a conversation about something that isn't politics. Like, they have to sort of act like they're having sexy time talk. And so, like, he's running his hand along her arm and her neck, and, like, they're looking at each other suggestively in a sexy way. And they get lulled into, like, this, like, want face.
The fucking drugs?
Well, they're far away from the drugs.
There's definitely a little bit of it, though.
Maybe a little bit, but, like, I don't think it's nearly as much as she wants to assume.
Yeah.
So, like, she even, like, looks at his lips suggestively, and he brushes his hand across his lap, and it, like, really cools him down. And I'm like, is it because his penis isn't working? Or is it because
his penis is working.
Then why would brushing his hand across his lap make him instantly unaroused?
I don't know.
Anyway, it cools him off. So then he tells her that the fire would go to Skull's Bay, knowing that Aelin would never go to Skull's Bay because the Pirate Lord would kill her on sight.
Yep, he would.
What an idiot!
I know, it's just so stupid.
She's in Skull's Bay!
Obviously it's not his fault, because, like, he's like, yes, this is the smart thing to say, but, like...
But also, if he knew her, he would know that the place where she shouldn't be is the first place she's gonna go.
Yeah, but he doesn't know her.
Guess. Anyway, he feels really guilty, because he's having sexy thoughts about Yrene. And Nesryn is, like, across the room.
Just watching them.
And, like, she doesn't really seem bothered, because her and Sartaq are still, like, chatting. And
they're having a good conversation.
A great conversation. Which, again, not raising suspicions.
No. So dumb.
But he looks at her, and he doesn't feel anything.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. He's a dick to her in this book.
Yes! Oh my god, is it even Chaol if he's not being a dick to somebody in a book?
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, Yrene immediately, like, gets this information and gets up and goes to tell Hasar what it is. It's so obvious.
And not subtle at all.
Not subtle. So, Yrene leaves. Chaol sticks around for an hour by sitting with Nesryn and Sartaq. I'm like, geez, he's such a, what's it called?
Cockblock?
Yes, thank you. And then Sartaq walks them back to their rooms. And once they get in, Chaol urges Nesryn into his room to talk. And she just sort of says, like, you're doing your thing here, but I'm needed elsewhere than the palace. And he's sort of like, no, I need you. We're supposed to do this together. But she just sort of says, like, Sartaq is planning on going south to the Rukim to learn more things about the Valg, and I want to go with him to figure out what he knows and to help try and, like, convince him to join us. And she's like, you need to stay because what you're doing is important. Like, healing is what you're here for. And he's like, oh, he's like, let's not decide right now. Like, it's so late. And then he feels guilty. So he's like, what was the day like with your family? Because she went off and had celebration day with her family.
Yeah, and he just holiday.
He feels guilty he hasn't asked. And she sees that he's only asking out of guilt, but she tells him anyway. And then it says they both, quote unquote, know. Know what?
Sarah J Maas, stop. We can't pick up on the signs.
It's just so obvious what they knew.
Yeah.
Anyway, so skip on over. Finally, like, that was so long with Chaol and Yrene. Like, there was barely any Nesryn. Anyway, so we go on over to Empire of Storms, chapter 24 and 25. Aelin's point of view. They're on the ship leaving Ilium, and they were a little bit concerned because they have to sail past Rifthold, but Aedion sort of reassures her that everything looks fine, like, safe. And Aelin's like, yes, it does. And then she sort of motions that Lysandra is perched at the tip of the mast, watching as a falcon. And Aedion's sort of a little bit annoyed, and he's like, can't you let the males take care of things every once in a while? And Aelin sort of, like, knows that this is going to be a frequent argument to, like, let others fight on her behalf, and the men as well. And I just, like, I'm, like, rolling my eyes, like, ugh, the patriarchy. They need to be wanted and needed. I'm like, why? Figure it out yourself. They talk about, like, what happened at the temple with Erawan, and Aedion doesn't really understand why Erawan left him and Dorian alone for so long. Like, he could have literally did what he did to that overseer, like, cleaved them in half, knowing that they would mean something to Aelin. Now, like, they didn't know that Dorian meant much to her until quite recently.
Yeah.
But, like...
They also thought she was dead, but...
Yeah, but, like, left them alone.
Yeah. It is weird, obviously.
It is weird.
He knew that they had magic in their bloodline, so, like...
Yeah. Especially with Aedion. I don't understand why they kept Aedion alive.
Yeah, and, like, they were like, he has a ring, it's perfect.
Yeah. Aelin thinks that, like, Erawan understood that if he hurt them, then she would just let the world go to hell for spite. And I'm like, wouldn't he want that, though? Like, why does he want someone to fight against him? Why would he want her... Like, wouldn't he want her to want the world to go to hell?
Yeah.
So that he could just do what he wanted with it and not have to fight her for it?
Yeah.
I feel like their logic is flawed.
Yeah, I don't see the point of this conversation.
No. So Aelin sort of brings up that Darrow mentions that Aedion fought at Theralis, which was a battle, and he was barely 14, but he tells her that, like, yeah, he was enlisted, he had to go fight, but Darrow did try to shield him as much as he could. But again, it was unavoidable. And Aelin then reveals that she doesn't blame Darrow for blocking her from the throne, and that she probably would have done the same thing if she were him. And that even though she's going to fight his decree, she understands why he did it. So, like, this is sort of the first sort of... It's Aelin telling us as the reader, don't hate his guts. And I'm like, I still will. Thank you very much.
Well, and it's not even, like, I'm not even upset that he did that as much as, like, it was a shock the first time I read it, and I was like, what the fuck? But then you think about it, and you're like, yeah, of course. But I'm more just pissed at how much of a dick he was.
Yeah,
like,
he was
there's no need to
dick.
be a dick. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm pissed he did it, but I'm also really pissed that he was as big a dick as he was.
Yeah. I'm not surprised he did it.
No. But I also feel like he could have, like, listen. you're young, you've been in Rifthold this whole time, you sort of abandoned us a little bit, so, like, we're not just gonna name you queen right off the bat. How about we give it a trial period, and how about you see what you can see, and then we'll talk. Like, yeah. I just feel like he could have been way more diplomatic about it instead of, man, you're the worst.
Oh, 100%. But that's, I think that's another part of, like, the whole black and white villains in these books.
Yeah, I guess. So, anyway, she's happy because they're stopping in Skulls Bay before heading to the Stone Marshes at EoS because they have more debts to call in. So, she's on a mission.
And they're soon going to see Rowan.
Yay! Then we quickly go to Manon's point of view. So, she woke up in Oakwald, which is, like, the huge forest that takes up, like, half the continent. It spans Aelin and Terrasen, I think. Mm-hmm. Just hollowing out my map. Oh, no, I lied. Oh, no. It spans everywhere. Like, the forest literally travels up the middle of the entire continent and, like everywhere. So it's in Ilwe, Melisande, not in Fenharrow. It's in the Melisande section. Then in Rift Adelin and in Terrasen. So it's literally everywhere. So she's in this forest. And she wakes up and she is strapped to Abraxos' saddle, and she's covered in blood, and the saddle is covered in blood, and his body is covered in blood. And she tries to look at her wound, and she starts bleeding again. And her healing had, like, sort of barely set in. Mm-hmm. And Abraxos was, like, looking at her and whining, because he's concerned.
Yeah.
Because she is dying on his back.
There's nothing he can do, because he's not people.
Yeah. So she is just, like, parched. She needs water. So she has to get off Abraxos, but, like, every move is agony. So Abraxos uses his head to sort of help ease her off of his back, but the pain makes her pass out again. And she wakes hours later, and Abraxos is still, like, caring for her. Like, he used his wing to cover her so that she'd be warm and, like, real cute. And she just sort of asks him to help her up, which he does. And she has to, like, leave. Because the forest is so dense, he obviously can't take her through the forest to the stream. So they're in a little clearing. So she has to walk by herself away from him to get to the stream. Mm-hmm. So she's drinking from the stream, and she hears a twig snap behind her and turns to see this, like, beautiful woman approach her. Full naked.
Of course.
Yeah. And apparently she had, like, perfect skin. And she knows that she's not a witch, but her instincts are, like, yelling at her to run. But she obviously can't because she's almost inside out.
Yeah. Inside out.
Fair. So the woman introduces herself as Erawan's bloodhound. And the Dark King kept her under other mountains until he had need of her. So, like, I guess she's been monster in the making.
Yeah.
He wants her, the bloodhound, to bring Manon home to be by his side, and that she obviously can't run with the state of her wound. And she sort of, like, I wonder how much of it is true, and you can call me naive, but, like, Erawan's like, I need her back by my side, I want her to be my wing leader again, blah, blah, blah. Like, I wonder if that's actually, like...
Yeah, that's a good point.
If he actually does want her to come back and be by his side as his wing leader, or if it's like, yes, he wants you to come back and be wing leader, and then as soon as she's brought back, he'd be like, psych, I just want to torture you.
I almost think he wants her to be the new...
matron.
I was going to say, oh my god, I forgot her name. I'm such a dick.
Elide.
Kaltane. Yeah.
Ooh. Not like, a fun role.
No, I feel like that's obviously not what he'd say to her because nobody would agree to that. But, like, I feel like he wants her to, like, physically breed with
Yes.
Not just put a stone in her.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so Manon, like, essentially uses every ounce of strength she has to pull her sword out to defend herself. And obviously Abraxos is over in the clearing and can't reach through the trees. He's roaring because he can't reach her. And the bloodhound, like, ripples and glows. And Manon knows that, like, it's an illusion. And you would not believe how many times I had to read this to understand.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what? She's an illusion? She's not really there? But then, like, she is there? And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So, essentially, it's not that she was an illusion. It's that her facade of being this naked, beautiful woman was an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a glamour. So, like, the reality is she looks very different. She's like this pale white creature with wings, no eyelids, and black stumps for teeth, and, like, huge nostrils, and, like, she's just atrocious.
Yeah.
Which is gross.
Great. This is what we were all hoping for.
So, like, I just don't understand what's the point. Like,
of the illusion?
Well,
I guess it's similar to, like, maybe he was making her to look similar to the witches. They look so beautiful, and then they're like, I'm gonna kill you.
But, like, if that's the case, why ripple the glamour and become the monstrosity?
I don't know.
Anyway, Manon sort of says, like, I'm not gonna die today, so she fakes the bloodhound out and manages to run for Abraxos, who jumps for her and grabs her in his claws, flies into the sky. Obviously, the bloodhound has wings, so follows them, but Abraxos hits her with his poisonous tail.
Love it.
Yeah, and then she screams, like, I will find you, before falling back into the woods. And Manon just orders Abraxos to, like, fly and find somewhere safe and fly to the coast or whatever, and then she passes out again.
Fair.
And then we say goodbye to Manon for quite a while.
Yeah, it is quite a while, isn't it?
Yeah, I think week 6.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
She's passed out and healing.
Yeah, say goodbye to Manon. So, we go back to Tower of Dawn now. There's not very much Empire of Storms, I feel like, here.
No.
So, we're in Yrene's point of view. She's super embarrassed after what happened on the couch with Chaol, like, the smoldering looks. She's like, oh my god, I'm not supposed to do that. I'm his healer. Everyone saw us. They're gonna think there's something between us.
I can understand it, though. I would feel embarrassed, too, if I was her.
But, like, that's the worst part, is that, like, I know it wasn't intentional, but it also was intentional.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they let the smoke get the best of them, but at the same time, they were supposed to look like that because Hasar wanted her to get information by using her body.
Yes.
Like,
I just hate that, like, she's putting her professional reputation at stake in this moment. And I get that, like, Hasar asked her to, but, like, for everybody else, they're just like, I don't know. Maybe they're not judging her. Maybe they don't care. But I just worry about her professional reputation.
Yeah, but valid. Like, Hasar's plan is stupid.
Oh, yeah.
She should have thought of a better plan.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she's, like, debating not showing up in the morning to heal him. She's like, oh my god, I'm going to be so embarrassed. However, she blamed...
She gets even more embarrassed.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
She blamed the smoke, which is what made her feel, quote-unquote, overheated. And then she thinks about his comforting size. So I guess, like, even in the chair, he's real tall? Or big? I don't know.
Well, he's got many muscles.
Is he the muscle man?
I don't know.
Is he like the Jason Momoa of Throne of Glass?
No. He can't be.
So, she thinks about his calluses, how she wanted to feel them against her skin. And apparently the smoke makes you abandon common sense and inhibitions. But, like, does that mean that it makes you abandon, like, that it makes you feel things you don't feel?
No.
So, She wants him.
Yeah.
She wants his bod.
She does want his bod.
So, she couldn't sleep, and her excuse was that the smoke had gripped her. And they must have put out a stronger dose than usual.
Because she doesn't normally want any of the other people.
Yeah. So, she had to take matters into her own hands, imagining it was him. In other words, it's all the smoke's fault, made her feel sexy, so she had to masturbate the thoughts of him.
Mm-hmm.
Hot.
Yep. But I'm like, why him? Why doesn't she just have, like, I don't know.
A spank bank?
Yeah.
Maybe she does. You don't know.
I know, but it's just, I guess because he got her so hot and bothered, that's why.
Yeah.
I guess it'd be kind of like hate sex. That'd be fun.
Yeah. But
I'm back on board.
Yeah. But also, she said after the day they had yesterday out in the town, having the tour, she decided to trust him. So again, it was real fast. It's like the fourth time they've ever met. And she was like, I hate his guts. And now she's like, I want his bod. Hmm. So she goes to the palace and goes to Chaol's room and orders Kaja away for supplies like normal. She walks on into Chaol's room because I guess they've come to an agreement, because she was like, normally I'm up at dawn, and he's like, you can come to me at dawn. I'm okay with it.
I'll be awake. I'll be up.
So she just literally like waltzes into his room at dawn and finds him asleep, and he's got no clothes on. Hmm. And Nesryn is also asleep. I don't know how many clothes she has on.
All of them, I believe.
So, like, it's kind of awkward, and he just wakes up because she's made noise walking in. And he's surprised to see her, and he sort of, like, does a guppy fish, like, his mouth sort of opens and closes, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Almost like he's, like, panicked to be caught.
Yes.
And
that's not good.
I know that you're caught, quote unquote, with your girlfriend in your bed, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And she just sort of is like, shit, and walks out into the room, walks back out of the bedroom and waits in the sitting room. Who doesn't knock?
I know.
She should have knocked. And she's just mortified to have to listen to, like, Nesryn wake up and, like, murmur softly and, like, have them have a little discussion, obviously, about the fact that she's here, and then, like, sort of walk past her all disheveled into her own room. And then Chaol comes out, and he's now fully clothed, but his hair is still disheveled, and, like I quote, like he ran his hands through it, or Nesryn did. So these are Yrene's thoughts. Like, she thinks that, like, maybe they had a moment, had a sexy times.
Had many moments.
Yeah. And she, like, can't even really look at him. And she's like, I can come back later if the two of you want to have breakfast. But he, like, stops her from moving with his chair. And he's like, no, I'm fine. Stay. Then she moves away from him and sort of makes it worse and offers them both a birth control tonic.
Oh my god. Ugh.
But he's like,
so
no,
awkward.
It is awkward. But then he's like, no, Nesryn's already taking one. And, like, that's pretty, like, not that it's bad, because I'm glad he knows it. But I feel like in this instance, the fact that he knows it is worse for them.
It's damning. It's like, no, she's already taken one. We're good. We're already having sex. Like, we had much sex last night. It was great. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So, like, just the fact that he knows, and he's like, no, she's already taking one, is just sort of like, oh shit, for Yrene. So then she goes out. I guess their room has a little courtyard, and she's looking at the flowers, and Nesryn sort of says goodbye to Chaol and leaves. It doesn't acknowledge Yrene, and Yrene doesn't acknowledge Nesryn. It's sort of weird. And so Chaol, like, tries to talk to Yrene after Nesryn leaves, but, like, all she can think of is, like, she has this hollow feeling. But, like, she knows she means nothing to him, and she needs to remember her plans to return home. And it's like, why are you already... What is this? What do you mean you have to remember your plans? Like, that... I don't... I don't... Yes! Why are you forgetting them?
Yeah.
Anyway, so he sort of just tells her, he manages to get in, like, we didn't sleep together, we were talking and fell asleep and nothing happened. And Yrene said that it filled her chest and emptied it at the same time. So she's happy about it. And Chaol turns to go to the couch for healing. When he actually sees the bag she brought and sees there's like a scroll she got from the library peeking out. Because all that stuff that she got from the library, she totally forgot about. So she decided to bring it today so they could look at it. So the color drains from his face and he growls. Because, of course, the men in this book all growl. Mm-hmm. And he just confirms that the scrolls are full of word marks.
Well, we guessed it.
I know. And she sort of then tells him that she figured out that the scrolls talk of 3 keys and 3 kings and a gate. And he's like, you need to hide those scrolls right now. So then she starts hiding them under cushions and inside vases. And I'm like, those are terrible hiding places.
Yeah.
But she says, like, one of the oldest scrolls is like 1,000 years old. And it's too precious to hide in that way. So they cover it up for some reason by speaking out loud. And Chaol's like, can you find my other boots? I'd like to wear them instead.
Yeah.
And it's essentially him being like, hey, hide the scroll in my boot.
Yeah.
So she goes into his closet, finds the boot, tucks the scroll in the boot, and then puts the boot in his drawer. And she says, oh, I can't find them. Maybe Kaja took them out to be polished. And then she sort of asks him in a veiled way if he can read the word marks, but he tells her no, but Aelin can. And then they make a plan to visit the library later to see if there's any more info that they're missing. And she whispers to him as they're exercising that Chaol only mentioned Erawan when talking about
the Valg.
The Valg. What about Orcus and Mantix? And Chaol's like, they were either killed or sent back to their world in the first war. Mm-mm. And he's like, I don't know which, though. And she's like, you should probably try and figure it out. And he's like, why? And she's like, well, what if Erawan opens the door and lets them back in?
Yeah. So, yeah, he's just like, oh, shit, that would suck a lot. And you're like, yes, yeah, it would.
Yes, it would. Absolutely.
And then he just, like, reaches, he's kind of like, more than that. He's like, that'll really fuck us up. And he starts kind of spiraling a bit. But then he reaches for the bit to start healing. And she's like, we can't start yet. He's spiraling. So she's like, who gave you the scar on your face? And I'm like, this is not, why would you ask him these questions? But he just says somebody who deserved to. And it's obviously the scar that Aelin gave him.
Yeah.
And then she's like, she's thinking of the Valg Kings and how Valg kill everything they touch. So she asks if they gave him the scar. And he's like, no, that's not really someone who deserved to. And then she asks about a scar by his temple. And he says that was his father gave it to him when he was a boy. And she then gives him the bit immediately. And you're like, now he's thinking about this terrible memory of his father injuring him. And you're gonna heal him? Like, is that better than being worried about 2 more kings? I don't know. It was a bit weird. But she basically, just gives him the bit, goes inside his wound, and Chaol, unsurprisingly, is pulled into the memory of the day he got that scar. You're like, you did this. Shock. So he basically told his father that he was leaving to join the castle guards because he wanted to stay with Dorian. And his father literally throws him down the, front stairs of the castle, or the, whatever it is, manor fortress? Seems like a fortress in the next book.
Yeah.
And he, smashes his face and his temple on like a stair, and that's where he got the scar. His father calls him pathetic and tells him to find his own way to Rifthold. And I don't know how old he is here, but he can't be old.
I think he's 12 or 13.
Yeah, like he's a young boy.
Yes.
It's not great. His mother is begging his father to stop, and his brother goes to like step forward, but like their father stops him from doing anything. They all go back inside and just leave him there. And one guard outside gives him a cloak, one gives him a horse, and one gives him a supply pack with food and stuff. And I guess he leaves. And he says he learned years later that his father actually saw them do that from the window, and he sent them into the wilds with their families. And only 2 were heard from the next summer. So, like, one of the families just completely died. And the other 2, he actually tried to send them money years later, but the messenger he sent couldn't find them. So that's unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate. Gotta love that parental abuse.
Right.
You know, child abuse is
your favorite?
My favorite thing to read about.
All right.
Yeah. Sure.
And then he just starts having the same flashes kind of as before, but he thinks of them as his choices and the consequences of them. So he sees the body on the bed, Nehemia, a dagger above his heart, Aelin trying to kill him, the head rolling, Sorsha, a collar on a neck, Dorian, a sword in the Avery at the end of Air of Fire. He throws his sword into the Avery because he's like, I'm no longer the guard guy and I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And he kind of thinks like, obviously this is super painful. He yells the whole time, but he thinks the pain is secondary because he's useless to anybody he tries to help. And it makes him specifically think of Nehemia a lot because like she was the hope for the future. And he thinks obviously he could have done something more to stop her from dying. Even though she did orchestrate her own death, he's like, he could have helped stop it if he had have told Selena to keep an eye out. And obviously she died and the slaves rose up and then they were all wiped out. So like that is a lot. And he's really putting this all completely on himself. And like, yes, he should have told Selena, but that doesn't mean she would have stopped the killer or stopped Nehemia from getting herself killed in some way. And like, he's not the one that ordered all the slaves to die. But like, if he had done something differently, it could have happened differently. I get what he's saying. I don't think he needs to put every piece of this guilt on his back, though.
No, I agree with you. I think, yes, he should feel a little bit of guilt. I don't think he should feel all of it. It's not all his fault.
No. He should have done things differently, obviously. We all know that. So the darkness is shoving itself down his throat, and he's, like, welcoming it because, like, he feels like he deserves this. And you're like, I wonder what the darkness is feeding off of. And then he sees memories that aren't his. He sees Morath, and he sees the dungeon beneath the castle, and he sees faces he knows, so his guards, begging for mercy. And he sees, which I can't imagine seeing and having in your brain, but he sees Dorian killing them all. And, like, obviously he knows intellectually that, like, Dorian has the collar on, it's not him. But, like, I would find that hard to, like...
Yeah, hard to
reconcile.
Erase.
Yeah, especially when you see Dorian next. You're like, that was you. You killed everybody.
It's no trouble for Chaol at all.
No. That, like, he doesn't even think about this anymore, I don't think.
No, he's fine.
So he feels the darkness, and he's just, like, ready to, like, be killed by it, to jump into it, whatever. But then it disappears, and he's in a field with a good memory that isn't his. And he sees Yrene and her mother, and they're in a garden, and they're, like, going over the uses of different plants for medicines. And it's, like, a really cute memory, and, like, her mother's like, what do we use this one for? And she's like, I can't remember. And you can tell, like, she's a perfectionist. She's, like, upset with herself for forgetting. And she's like, it's for pie! Ha 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 ha! Like...
It's like your quintessential happy memory. It has to involve pie.
Yes. But Chaol can, like, it's also a contrast to, like, his family. Yeah, even though like his family's still alive. So,
but his dad like hates his guts.
Yeah, and he hasn't heard from his mother since then. And you're like, oh, what is happening with her? But anyway, we'll find that out next book. But he actually thinks that like there's love, joy, and happiness here, and he can feel that she was loved unconditionally. And like obviously he was barely loved, and it was definitely conditional.
Yeah.
So he gets pulled back into his body, and he's just lying in bed, and he can move his full feet, which is like a miracle. But also Yrene has disappeared, and I'm like, how did she get out of there so fast? Like, last time she could barely cover up that she had a nosebleed, and now she's not even in the same room as him as he comes back to himself. So it's just like, okay. But he goes out and finds her in the garden, and she's just sitting there like silently crying, and he asks if she's hurt, because obviously last time she had a nosebleed. And she says she forgot what like her mother looked and smelled like. And she also tells him like they take oaths to not take a life, and her mother broke it that day. And she says a soldier grabbed her, not the same day in the memory, but the day that she died. A soldier grabbed Yrene, and her mom killed them, and that gave her time to run, but she did watch like as they burned her mother, which is traumatizing as fuck.
Very traumatizing.
Like,
and burned her alive.
Yeah,
like,
heard her screaming. She even says she like heard her screaming. You're like, that is not okay. You are not okay. You need therapy too.
Yeah. Everyone just needs therapy.
They do. Yrene says that her mother was good, kind, and that she loved Yrene. And he took her away. The man he served took her away. So she then kind of explains to him, like, after her mother died, she ran to her mother's cousin's house in the north of Fenharrow, and she worked on a farm, and then later she left, and that was when she was 18. And she ran to, well, she didn't run. She left, and it took her 6 months, but she eventually got to Inish. And she says that's where she ran out of money, and she took a job, and she worked as a barmaid, and she stayed there for a year. He asks how she got here, like how did she end up getting out of Inish, but she says that that's a long story, and we know it's a short story. It's the shortest story of the assassin and the healer in the book.
Yes, because that is the exact story.
Yeah. Just give him the book. You can figure it out. She then tells him, like, she knows who gave him the wound, and that it was the old king, and he was possessed. And we're like, Jesus, how did she figure all this out? She was just, like, rooting around while he was in the worst memories ever. He apologizes for not actually telling her, but he says it was too sensitive of information, and it could bring up questions about Dorian's suitability if, like, he was conceived by a Valg father. And you're like, yes, I didn't even really think of that until they brought it up the first time. I was like, oh, true. But she tells him, like, this gives her more motivation to fight because she knows that, like, she's kind of fighting the king in a way by fighting this back. And she says, like, inside of him, it was so dark, and she could see terrible memories. She could see his and the king's. So she just threw a happy memory at it. And she's glad that a memory of her mother beat back the darkness a little further. And she tells him she also saw his bastard father, and she tells him that he deserved better as a child than to be thrown down the stairs. And you're like,
that's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all children deserve more than being thrown down the stairs, to be honest.
Right? Yes. Agreed.
I don't think that's specific to him.
No. But, yeah, he probably doesn't believe it, so it's good to hear. She sees the movement in his feet then, and she smiles, and he kind of thinks back to earlier when she came in and he was in bed with Nesryn, and he wishes that he could walk so that he could have crawled towards Yrene and, like, told her nothing was happening, like, begged her to not, what? Like, why? Because he felt so bad that she, like, looked so upset after walking in on them when she should have knocked.
Which is just awkward on two levels. Like, one, the fact that she looked so upset. Like, girl, hide your feelings a little better.
Put your feelings away.
Put them away. But also, the fact that he feels guilty about being caught in bed with his girlfriend. Like, also, dude, put that away.
Yeah, put your feelings away, too.
Yeah. They both need to tuck those inside until they've dealt with the whole Nesryn thing.
Yeah. It's Akko. So then she starts, like, poking his foot, and she asks, like, if he can gauge the pressure, and he can. And he asks if she'll eat with him, and she says yes, which is, like, a first.
Yeah.
We go over to Empire of Storms now, and chapter 26, and Dorian's point of view, and they've been in Skulls Bay for 2 weeks, and Rolfe is, like, refusing to see them. So they train magic in the mornings in a clearing, and they run to training in the morning, and they run back afterwards. So, like, Rowan's really putting in the work with him, and I love it. And Dorian's, like, never had to be trained like this, because he's a prince. Yeah. He actually thinks, like, he doesn't understand how Aelin fell in love with Rowan, and he thinks, like, they both have to be sadistic, which I just love.
Yeah.
He also says, like, Fenris and Gavriel sometimes go to training, except for the days when, like, he is struggling with his PTSD and trauma. Rowan makes them not come. And he's like, he doesn't know if he's pissed that Rowan can tell, or if he's, like, appreciative that Rowan actually kicks them out. So he's, like, of two minds.
Yeah.
Every afternoon, they basically look for gossip and news, and we get that, like, Rolfe only has himself and 7 other captains left, so there's only 8 of them, and they're, like, privateer.
Armada?
Fleet? Don't know.
Yeah.
The witches obviously have Rifthold in their grasps, and, like, ships from the Ferrying Gap are sailing to Rifthold with strange soldiers and beasts that are turning the city into a hunting ground, which is not good.
No.
Some of the armada is near Ilwe, and some is near Melisande. And Erawan's being smart, because Rowan says they're going to have to sacrifice land, allies, and geographical advantages in the war based on where they're positioned. So that's not good. In all the news and gossip, they don't hear anything about Aelin, and they don't hear anything about Dorian's mother and brother, which is not overly surprising that they don't hear anything about his mother and brother, because who's going to talk about them?
Do we ever hear from them again?
I don't think so.
Great.
Dorian decides he's done waiting for Rolfe to talk to them, and he says he needs some paper and a messenger. And 3 hours later, they're summoned to Rolfe's office. And Dorian thinks to himself that he wrote a letter to himself, and then he got the messenger to bring it back. And he paced around and pretended that it was news, and they called it, like, war-altering information, and that Rolfe could either gain or lose everything if he knew this. So that's why he called them. Which is fun. And smart. Dorian's smart.
But, I just don't understand the messenger. Wouldn't the messenger be able, like, you would think that Rolfe would have the messenger on his payroll, and wouldn't the messenger be like, he paid me, like, $10 to deliver him this note to himself? Like,
yeah, but I think Rowan is the one that got the messenger to deliver it. Oh. And maybe he was, like, pretended to not be, I don't know. Anyway, it worked somehow.
Yeah.
Gavriel and Fenris are also coming to this meeting. So Rolfe walks into his office, and then he stops dead because Aelin is there.
I actually really love her reveal. It's so good.
I don't.
You don't love it?
No. But we'll get to that when we get to it, because
okay.
This just ends with she just says she likes this office far better than his other one. And then we jump back to Tower of Dawn, and I'm like, what? Like, bad timing. But
is that why you don't like it?
No.
Don't like it for other reasons?
I just find it, like, embarrassing. I'm like, why are we doing this? This is, like, convoluted.
I guess I liked it. I like how she was, like, sitting in his chair, taking over his space.
I don't mind that part. I'm just like, why are we so involved in this? Like, you're going to have to tell him soon enough who you are.
Yeah, I guess.
We can get more into it, but, you know, we're almost there. We're just jumping over to Tower of Dawn for chapter 24, which is a short one. It's actually in Nesryn's point of view, which we love. And she specifically thinks to herself that she knows Chaol only spoke with her last night because he felt guilty. And she's telling herself that she's fine with it. She's like, she was a replacement for 2 of the women in his life, and why not start, like, be the replacement for a third now? So
it was the second. It was the first.
Remember the one that what's his name got in bed with?
The one that Roland slept with.
Yeah, that's when she first came into his life.
Right.
And then Aelin, and now this. I'm like, jeez, he's really he's being a dick. So she's out hunting the city in the middle of the day for Valg, and she can't find any. And you're like, nah, I'm not surprised.
No, it's the middle of the day.
Yeah. So she goes back to the castle, but she doesn't want to go see Chaol because it's awkward. And she actually sees Kadara on the roof, so she goes up to the Eyrie, and Sartaq, like, shows up right on her heels, and he's like, I heard you were coming this way. And she's like, how? And he's just like, the castle's full of spies, and some are mine. Which I just love. She thinks, like, her aunt and uncle earlier told her that she looks tired and she needs to eat more and, like, all of this stuff. And she's really feeling it. Like, she's really feeling beat out, and it doesn't seem like she's in a great headspace, and everyone's taking advantage of her, and I feel bad.
And no one's taking care of her.
Well, her aunt and uncle are trying to. Uncle. But, like, she can't accept that really fully because she's got so much on her plate and she's worried about her family. So, of course she looks shitty. Leave her alone. I'm sure she's beautiful still. Anyway. He asks her if she wanted something, obviously, because she came up here. And she says she was just looking for some quiet. So he's like, oh, cool. I'll leave you to it. And she's like, wait, no. You can stay. And I don't know. I find that so relatable. Like, when you, like, have certain people in your life that you're like, no, I just mean quiet, but, like, you can be here. I just don't want anybody else here. And, like, they're moving fast.
They are.
That is a comfortable way to feel with somebody. She just tells him then that she spent the day with her family and it was tiring. And he says he knows how she feels. And he asks her if she loves them. And she says yes. And she asks if he loves his family. And he says that Kadara and the other riders are his family. But his kin, it's hard to love one another when you can't trust each other. Which is completely fair.
Yeah. Well, like, there must always be on eggshells with each other.
And he even says, like, don't feel bad for me about it. At least I have Kadara and, like, the riders. Like, most of my siblings don't have anybody that they can love and trust. Sartaq then tells her that he's leaving soon to find the answers they spoke of. And he says he's sure her family will have his head for this, but he asks her to go. And she's just like, well, how long are you going to be gone for? Because, like, they're there for a limited amount of time. There's a fucking war happening. Like, it's a big deal. But he tells her no more than 3 weeks. And she says that she needs to talk to Chaol. And he's like, okay, cool. But, like, I'm leaving soon. So let me know.
Yeah.
Like, he's super chill.
She thinks, like, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, end of the week.
Yeah, he's super chill about it. He's like, oh, yeah, no big deal. Just, like, throwing it out there. And then, like, she hears servants bringing his stuff up in the moment. And you're like, this isn't soon. This is fucking immediately.
Now.
Yeah. And she realizes that. And she says to him, like, you weren't going to say goodbye? And he said, like, it's just interesting. Because, like, she even thinks to herself that she shouldn't be, like, asking him this, because, like, he doesn't owe it to her to say goodbye, but, like, clearly there's a relationship there that, like, if he went away and then by the time that he came back she was gone because, like, they're done everything there, like, she'd never see him again. So I get what she's saying. But he actually says he figures that, like, after last night she'd be occupied all day And she knows he's implying, like, having sex with Chaol. And she's like, all day.
All day?
Yeah. And he says, well, I would take all day. Which I love. I love it.
I do too.
It's like, we're finally getting there.
Yay.
So she asks how far away the camp is, and he says it'll basically be like 2.5 days. There's 2 nights on the way there. And he tells her that, like, she has an hour to decide because he's really leaving right now. She thinks back to last night. She actually saw Chaol's toes curl when she was in bed with him, and it made her cry with happiness. And she also thinks to herself that, like, she doesn't want to be his consolation prize. And she decides to, because, like, when they left Rifthold originally, Chaol was like, let's have an adventure together. But she decides here that she wants to have an adventure herself. And I just love her, and I completely appreciate this. But she tells him yes. So he tells her to pack light because they don't have much room. And she just says that she has nothing. And she says she'll leave a note for Chaol. And she leaves one for her aunt and uncle, and she leaves one for Chaol. And she says she's gone with Sartaq to see the Rukin for 3 weeks, and she'll hold him to no promises and will hold to none of her own. And
so essentially, breaking up with you.
Yeah, exactly. Which, perfect. I'm glad that she did. Although it's kind of funny. It's kind of like getting broken up with over text. But, like, I don't blame her because he's been, like, pushing her away and, like, ignoring her. So, like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she gets on Kadara then and literally takes fucking nothing than, like, the clothes on her back with her. Like, she's...
Like, not even a toothbrush.
Yeah.
Like, they're about to be traveling for 2.5 days.
Yeah.
Like, go get a toothbrush.
Yeah, really, though. At the very least.
Some panties, anything.
What if she gets her period? Does she not have bras?
Yeah. Oh, dear.
I don't understand.
And, like, her saying she has nothing. She has to have a change of clothes.
She has pajamas, one would assume.
She just sleeps naked.
Well, that's probably why Yrene was like, whoa! So she gets on Kadara, and he says he was praying she'd say yes. And she says that she was too. And it's just so cute.
I love it.
Me too. Cool. So we're going over to Empire of Storms now, chapters 27 to 29. And we start off in Dorian's point of view. And it's just kind of funny that it's in Dorian's point of view. And I don't really know why they do it that way. But, you know. So, Rolfe says that he remembers saying that if Celaena Sardathian set foot in his territory again, her life was forfeit, which is what you said earlier. Or was that last week? After his story in Assassin's Blade. It was last week. Anyway, not the point. So, and she's just like, where would the fun be in that? And she says, hello, Majesty, to Dorian. And he says, hello, Celaena, because he realizes that, like, she's putting on a part here. She is Celaena right now. She's not Aelin. And he's playing along with that. And I think that's my issue.
But this is what I love about it.
It's my...
I love that, like, one, I love that she just has the arrogance of Celaena and, like, sitting in Rolfe's chair after he was like, if you come back, I'll kill you. And she's like, hello, I'm in your chair. And two, I love that everybody is playing along and being like, hey, Celaena, and being like, not like, Your Majesty, Aelin.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I just love that they're purposefully, like, making Rolfe angry.
I guess I just don't see the point. I'm like, I get that she's like showing up and he's pissed at her, and obviously she needs to get that out of the way, but I don't see the point of A, pissing him off, because that seems not very smart, or B, like, why why she's like, this is later on, but why she's like, and now I'll introduce you to the Queen of Terrasen. And I'm like, why are you showing him you have a shapeshifter? Like, why? I don't know. It just seems weird to me, and I don't get it.
I just took it as them, like, playing around. Being like, ha, psych. Like, just being funny.
Yeah, I guess. I guess I just don't... I would never do this, and it seems a stupid way to try to start an alliance, but... And I just feel like, I don't know, there are parts that I do like, but we'll just get into it. So yeah, she obviously antagonizes Rolfe a bit, and then she, like, looks Rowan up and down, and I kind of, like, I find this part funny because obviously she's, like, still pretending to be Celaena, but is talking to Rowan. Actually, this part, I find it funny because of how, like, much she loves herself, but I'm also kind of like, it seems cringy, like, why are you doing this? But she tells Rowan that she'd like to know him, and he says he isn't on the market, unfortunately, and she says, oh, what a pity. And then she picks up a handful of emeralds, and, like, clunks one down at a time as she, like, gives compliments to Rowan's partner, which is obviously her. So it's just like,
yeah,
it's kind of funny, but it's also like, I don't know. I like the emerald play though, like what she does with those.
But it's also very obvious.
Oh, of course.
Like, you pick up a handful of like anything, you plunk it down. It's so easy to pocket.
Yeah. Although
pocket it after.
I don't know how she got one in her mouth, but you know. We're also in Dorian's point of view, and I don't think he's super observant, so I'll go with that. So Rolfe cuts in and asks what she's doing there, because he's heard that she's now free, that she, like, sold Erawan's estate after he died, and she can do whatever she wants now. And he also just, like, asks Dorian if he wants to deal with her, because she used to be his champion. And Dorian just says you don't deal with Celaena Sardathian, you just survive her. Which I love that. I love him saying that. It's, like, my favorite part. And then Celaena / Aelin kind of just implies that, like, war is lucrative, and she wanted to come here and see what his plans are before deciding what she wanted to do. Which kind of surprises him, because he's like, where's the self-righteous 16-year-old who destroyed this town for 200 slaves? Because, like, lucrative in war doesn't really seem her type after doing something like that. Yeah. But she just says, like, yeah, I spent a year in Endovir, and that changed me, basically. And she says, like, she's paid for her arrogance, and she said so did Erawan. And I think that's kind of, like, it seems like she's implying to him that she's the one that had Erawan killed in that moment.
And she is.
Well, yeah. And it seems like he realizes that and is like, oh, shit. So then he asks her to take the emerald out of her sleeve, which she pulls out. And then he's like, and the other one. And she, like, spits it, and it goes in an arc from her mouth and plunks into the dish, which I love.
Very. Yeah. Technique. She got spit skills.
She... No. Ugh. Yep. Sure. So, then she asks him, she says she has 2 questions for him. So she asks if he's bought or traded slaves since Assassin's Blade times. And he said he hasn't. And she asks if he's provided sanctuary to any slaves. And he says, like, they haven't gone out of their way to, but if any arrived, then they would. And she's just like, good. And I already know all that because I looked through all your shit today already. So I'm glad you didn't lie. And you're like, fair enough. He's just like, do you know how much your stunt cost me? And then Dorian notices a piece of paper stuck on the wall behind her that has, like, a bunch of various daggers in it. And he can see it's, like, a list of items and that the sum at the bottom is giant. And he's like, oh, shit. Then Rolfe literally turns to the 3 Fae males in the room. And he's like, hey, you want my help in this war? you kill her. Which I do like that part too. I find that funny. And obviously Aelin's just like, they can't. And he's like, you're not as strong as these Fae males. Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, but you should sit down. And then she whistles and she's like, I want to introduce you to the Queen of Terrasen. And then Aelin walks in. Mm-hmm. And this is a part that I was just like, why are we showing him we have a shapeshifter? Aren't we trying to trick him later? Like, why are we giving away all of our... I don't
know if they're trying to trick him, though.
They're not really. I feel like it's more of like they're setting in place a prophecy. Like, it feels like it's kind of like a prophecy, and then they're like setting it in motion to like put the...
I feel like they're trying to make him sort of like one of their close sort of confidants, almost like they're trying to invite him into their like not inner circle, but like sort of the inner circle.
It just doesn't make sense to me in this moment that they're pissing him off, but they're also showing him their like greatest weapon. Yeah. And then he just doesn't care and tells them to fuck off, basically. So it just doesn't... I don't know. I know it's a scene, like, it's there because Selena/Aelin is cocky and, like, she's got swagger, and this is how Selena would come back if she ever came back. But it's like, it just confused me, was why I didn't like it. But, you know, I'm sure if it was in, like, a movie or something, I'm sure it would be, like, a cool scene there. Yeah. So, I guess that's part of it. So, yeah. He's just like, what the fuck? Aelin doesn't have a twin. And then Lysandra shifts into her human form, and Fenris and Gavriel are just like, what the fuck? But basically, they and Dorian confirm that Aelin is actually Aelin, and also Selena. And then Aelin asks to talk to Rolfe about the war and her cause. So we go to Aelin's point of view now, and she goes to sit down, and Rowan whispers in her ear that the cadre is helping them because they need to find and kill Lorcan, and obviously he's coming back to them. And he tells her that he missed her, and she, like, goes up and kisses him, and it's just sweet. And everyone's just watching them or, like, trying not to watch them. Yeah. It's, like...
so weird.
Yeah.
Like, don't look.
Yeah. She goes back to talking to Rolfe now, and they, like, insult each other, and she gives him the letter from Murtaugh, that letter of recommendation, and he just throws it in the trash without reading it. And Dorian cuts in then and says, like, if they win the war, the two largest kingdoms, his and Terrasen, will, like, back him and legitimize him as, like, a pirate king and legitimize his kingdom. So, like, he has some things to gain if he allies with them. And Aelin, like, promises a better world. And he's just like, you're a child. Like, you can't promise a better world. Like, yeah, that kind of shit. Which, like, I get it, but it's just funny. And then he asks what news Dorian got. And Dorian's just like, none. I tricked you. So he kicks them out of his office, and he says that they all have 2 days to leave the island, and then if she comes back after that, she's dead. And you're like, okay, so this went poorly. Yeah. So they're in the hallway, and Gavriel asks where his son is, obviously, because that's the only thing he's caring about right now. And Aelin just, like, stalls him, and she says it's not up to him where, when, or how he meets him. And he basically, like, demands her to tell him. But she's just like, I don't know where he is. And they look around, and Lysandra has disappeared because she's gone off to warn him. Which I just kind of love. I love that.
So, like, I thought Rowan had sent messages to her to let her know. Because remember, Rowan's like, I need to send a message. And Rolfe was like, I don't know why you bother. Like, you know, Aelin's on her way here. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I figured he would have sent a message to be like, give this to her so she at least knows what she's walking into.
I assumed that he was sending a message to, like, Eelway when he heard that Maeve was going towards them. Because, like, it doesn't seem like she got it. Like, if he did send a message to her, we didn't hear about it. So I don't know who he sent a message to. Maybe it just didn't get to her.
Maybe.
But yeah. But I guess they weren't really expecting Gavriel to be in the office is the other thing. Like, there's a difference in knowing he's on this island and knowing he's in the office with her now. And that, like, if she leaves and goes to Aedion, like, I guess.
Right.
You know. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, after that, Aelin and Dorian have a little chat, and she tells him, like, she's sorry about Rifthold, and he thanks her for sending Rowan. And she says, like, they're both without their crowns right now. And he just says, like, maybe that's a good thing. And I think this is more his, like, self-hatred and nothing to do with her, but he's just, like, he's not in a great place. So they meet in a room and, like, discuss what everybody knows. And Aedion is kind of, like, working out the best use of the Bane based on all the information that everybody has. And they say, like, Manon could be a really good ally, and, like, it would really divide the witches if they could get her on their side. And Dorian asks, like, what the witches actually want. Like, it has to be more in this alliance than just, like, they're evil, you know? Like, there has to be something more there. Which we know there is. We know that he's, like, they promised that they could go back to the wastes or whatever.
Which is a terrible name for a land. Why would you want something that's called the Wastes?
I know. And, like, was it called something else before?
Yeah.
Because it feels like
I wonder.
If nothing grows there now because of the curse, but it feels like it should have had a different name before it was wasted. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope we get some of these answers at some point. But
we won't.
Yeah, I'm not overly hopeful. Aelin just thinks of how much she has to do, and she thinks, like, starting with getting Ralph to ally with them, and also asking him to use his map to show them where the lock is in the marshes. And the first thing they need to do there is figure out if the map actually works. So we go to Aedion's point of view. And Lysandra is, like, a beautiful redheaded woman pretending to be working in, like, a dead-end alley. And they're, like, just pretending to make out if they hear anyone coming. And she's wearing the amulet of Orinth. And Aedion, like, doesn't think this is something that's valuable enough for him to come get. Because there's so much treasure around anyway. Why would he care about this one necklace? But Lysandra says that Rowan thinks he'll be interested in it. And he just snaps that, like, Rowan and Aelin love keeping their secrets. And you're like, yes, they do.
I'm surprised they haven't told him already.
I know.
Like, I'm surprised he doesn't know that there's a word key in there. You would think that that's something they would divulge.
I know. You'd think by now. And also, you'd think he would have noticed, like, because earlier in this book, Evangeline was wearing it, and she was like, oh shit, and then she started wearing it all the time. So you think he would have noticed how, like, protective they were. So he just says that he's tired then, because he, like, snapped at her, and she's like, we're all tired. And he thinks that, like, shifting for her, especially bigger forms like a human and a snow leopard, takes a lot of energy. Like, she can shift in small forms very quickly, but the bigger ones take a lot more effort.
A lot more out of her, yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Not foreshadowing at all.
No, definitely not. Dorian shows up then, and Aedion just, like, hates his face. Like, he's just annoyed at the sight of him. And I don't know why, but I really wasn't expecting this, which is probably dumb. But, like...
But I also find that Aedion hates everybody. Except for Aelin and Lysandra, and at times Rowan.
Yeah, and at times but, like, he hates everybody.
It doesn't seem like he likes anybody particularly well, apart from Aelin, and even then he still, like, gets into really big fights with her sometimes.
Yeah.
So I don't...
No, I get it.
Know. I find it an odd contradiction for his character, who's supposed to be this, like, congenial guy. Like, you know, he's sort of like the one that like eases the tension all the time, but not.
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, so he just thinks like when he sees Dorian's face, he's automatically pissed. It's like the son of his enemy, and like he was there when Dorian stabbed Aelin, even though Dorian wasn't Dorian at the time. Rowan sent him Dorian to check on them, and Dorian's just kind of surprised that like Lysandra can switch human forms seemingly so easily. And she just says, yeah, but she would love to be able to turn into a plant or like a bit of wind. So like clearly she's very tired and doing her best. But he asks if she'd actually be able to do that, because that'd be interesting. And Aedion just immediately says yes because he's annoyed at him, but she's just like, no, of course I can't turn into wind. Like, what are you talking about? They like kind of force some small talk, and I don't know why, but Aedion's just like, so you and Rowan didn't kill each other? And Dorian's like, of course not. I'm just grateful that he saved me. Like, he almost burnt himself out in the process. Like, I'm just so grateful to be alive, basically. And then Dorian is like, so are you going to see your father? Like, this is like the biggest small talk ever. Like, why are we... Ugh. But Aedion's just like, of course, like, they're around, so he's gonna have to see him. They're kind of working together now. They basically just tell Dorian there's nothing to report, so he goes back. And then Lysandra tells Aedion that he should be nicer to Dorian, because Dorian was, like, enslaved and violated, and he should have some compassion for him. And he just says, like, he knew Dorian as a reckless, arrogant prince, and she's like, I knew Aelin as the same. Like, they've grown up and they've changed. Like, they're not the same as they used to be when they were children. But I just think this is interesting because you talked about it a bit earlier, how Aedion was fighting in a battle at 14. Like, they had the time to be children and to grow, but Aedion has never had the luxury of being a child. Even when he was like a toddler, I don't know how many years are between them, but even when he was like really young, his sole focus and purpose was protecting Aelin. So like he's never had the luxury of actually being a child. And I think this was like the first read through that I like, it kind of clicked with me that he's been like screwed over so badly.
Yeah.
It's sad.
It's sad. Now I feel bad.
Sorry. Aedion just kind of tells Lysandra that, like, Dorian's face reminds him of hearing that his family and Aelin were dead. And, like, obviously Aelin being his responsibility, he took that very hard. She says that Aelin forgave him, and he says that he'll try. And she just says, try harder and try better. Like, okay. He kind of, like, tries to throw his rank in her face because, like, he's third in this court and she's below him. And she's like, fuck off. And they get a tiny bit flirty. But then he can see panic in her eyes and she steps back because they're, like, a bit too close. And Aedion is just like, shit, I didn't mean to, like, not pressure her, but, like, startle her with my feelings. And he actually thinks, like, if he ever sees that she wants a man, and even if it's not him, he'll be glad for her because clearly she's gone through so much. And then he asks if his father wanted to see him, which she's like, yeah, he threatened Aelin. But she also says that she thinks that his father would respect whatever Aedion wants. Like, he seems like a good enough male that he'll respect what, like, if he doesn't want him around, he'd respect that. And she says it'll be hard to avoid him, obviously, if they're traveling together and stuff. Aedion says he doesn't know what he'd say to him. Like, he's known him his whole life as the Lion of the North. He's like a fairy tale, and now he just found out that this, like, mythical person is his father.
Yeah.
And he asks what she'd do, but she just says her father was never around. Like, her father either didn't know that her mother was pregnant or didn't care and just left before she was born. And then we know her mother, like, threw her out as soon as she found out she was a shapeshifter, so...
Yeah.
She doesn't have a great parent story either. She asks him what he wants. And it kind of makes him stop and think, because he's like... He doesn't know, and he says the only thing that he has ever wanted in his life was the blood oath, and Aelin gave that to Rowan, and he's kind of says like he's okay with that now, but it is the only thing that he ever wanted in his life, and he kind of realizes in this moment how little he's like wanted or expected in life, and I think that's kind of just another like. He never really had a childhood. He never really could want things. And it's just another moment of, like, his life is a bit sad. Then he asks Lysandra to come with him tomorrow to meet his father. And she's like, oh, why would you want me to come? But they hear footsteps, and Rolfe's barmaid shows up. And they're like, interesting. Because it's a dead-end alley. Nobody would just walk in there. Unless they were looking for something. So they know that the map must work. We go over to Tower of Dawn now, chapters 25 to 27. And we're in Yrene's point of view. And they take the horses to the Torre library. And while they're in the Torre, there are some stairs around. So she has to, like, help him up the stairs in his chair. And he's like, that's the first time you've ever touched my chair. And she's just like, don't get used to it. And it's just more of the, like...
You can do it yourself sort of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. So they ask Nusha, the head librarian, to show them where she found the Eelway texts and the word marks. And she just asks if it's going to bring trouble. And Yrene is like, not if I can help it. So she, like, brings them down to, like, far down in the library to where she found them. We get that the library is 1,500 years old, and it was actually a gift from an ancient queen to healers who saved her daughter. And the Torre has, like, stayed whole and survived through, like, many different conquests that have come through. And Yrene just says, like, healers are needed by all conquerors. So, like, it's not surprising that they don't attack the Torre.
I don't agree with this at all.
I know, but it's to get us somewhere.
I understand, but it's like one of the first things that, like, conquerors do is they sack, like, all places of knowledge because they want to rewrite history in their own image.
Yeah.
So, like,
well, and
conquerors need healers, they need libraries. No, they don't.
Yeah.
Healers, maybe, but, like, they don't need the fucking library.
No, but I think it's more about, like, keeping the healers to heal them. But you'd think that the Torre would be one of the places that you would attack first to get the healers, like, out of the way while you're trying to take over a place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's all to get to this point, which Yrene then says, like, she wonders why the king of Otterlin killed the healers. And then she's like, the king was possessed, so it was like the Valg that were hunting the healers or something. And they kind of speak a bit, they don't say things like outright because they're afraid people could be listening, but they kind of have a conversation where Chaol tells her, like, the king was able to stop magic, and he's like, it's a long story, so he doesn't really get into how. And Yrene wonders why the king killed all the healers, and she's like, the king was possessed, so she's like, was it the Valg that was hunting the healers? Like, what's going on? But Chaol kind of says, like, the man within the king actually fought to hide magic wielders so that they couldn't be possessed too, and he stopped magic, but he doesn't, like, get into how he did it. And he says, like, she cuts in and says, like, healers can't fight, so why would it matter? Like, why would he not want healers around? And he just says that she has something that they don't want her to understand. And I don't really know what he's talking about. Like, I guess later on I get it, but like I didn't think that he realized this early enough. Not early enough. I thought it took us time to realize.
Yeah.
I don't really know what he's talking about.
Me neither.
So, there's a few moments like this in this book, it seems like. Sarah J Maas, I'm not as smart as you think I am, so yeah, they grab a bunch of books, and then we go over to Nesryn's point of view. And they make it to a campsite for the night, and she's, like, not really used to flying, and she really needs to pee. Which is just kind of funny. But then she goes to help Sartaq after, and, like, she goes to take off Kadara's saddle, but he tells her that they keep it on in case there's an ambush. And that makes them think of wyverns, so he asks if she's actually seen them, and she says yes, and that Kadara is, like, half to 2/3 of the size of a wyvern. And she asks if Kadara is, like, small or big for a rook. And he said that he thought that she had heard all of the stories. And she just kind of says, well, yeah, she's heard them. But she then is like, did you know that you're called the Winged Prince? And he just says yes. And she asks if he likes it. And he says it's strange to be a living story. And he also says, like, she's surrounded by a bunch of them too, and he asks how they feel about it. And she's just like, well, Aelin enjoys it because she's Aelin. But she doesn't actually know the others well enough to know if they do enjoy it. She does say that, like, Aedion and Aelin are more like siblings, and he's kind of like her in a bit of ways. And Sartaq responds that, like, he knows that Aedion is the Wolf of the North. And she's just surprised that he's heard of all of them, and he's just like, I have really good spies. She says then that, like, Aedion's Bane is very skilled, and she's kind of trying to, like, get him to agree to help them and be like, we've got some good guys. And, like, he can kind of see through it. She's not super good at the, like, I don't even know what you'd call it, the subtle mentions of power. I don't know. But he just agrees, like, he's heard that. And he asks what tales they tell of her. And she's just like, there are none about me. And she's, like, completely fine with it. She's like, she doesn't want fame anyway. And he says, not even the story about the impossible arrow that saved the shapeshifter. And you're like, ooh, he really does know things. So they kind of just, like, make a fire. No, they don't make a fire. The opposite of that. They cannot make a fire.
They're not allowed to make a fire.
Yeah. They just eat and, like, sit together, and she looks up at the stars, which are different here, which is kind of like it's a bit of a shock to her to see the different stars, and stars are obviously a big thing in this book. And then a little while later, he says Neith's arrow. That's what his spies called her. And Neith was, like, a god of, or goddess of archery, hunting, that kind of stuff, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So we go over to Chaol's point of view now, and he is eating at the Torre, and Cook is fawning over him, and then he's like, okay, cool, I need to leave. And they're like, nope, you're staying the night. And he's like, okay. So he sends a note to Nesryn, which is just funny. And Yrene brings him to a guest room, and she checks his feet again, and then she's like, do you need me to find you some clothes? And he's like, no, I sleep naked. And then she's like, do you need water? Do you need, like... I know. Of course he does. But then she's like, do you need water? Do you need me to get, like... She even asks if, like, he needs her help to, like, get the... What is it called? Something to pee in, basically. And he's like, no, I'm fine. It's all about aim. And you're like, this is so awkward. Why are we doing this?
Get his penis out? Like...
I guess, like, bring over a bedpan.
I guess.
So, yeah. It's just like, why are we doing this? And he's like, I have everything and I'm fine. Like, you can go to bed now.
You don't need to help me pee. I don't need you to hold my penis.
Right? My hands work just fine. So she goes to leave, and he just says thank you for all of it. And it kind of feels like a turning point in their relationship, which then the next day gets completely fucked. So the next morning, Aricia escorts him and his, like, pile of books.
Who's Aricia again?
This is the first time we've met her.
Is it?
I think so.
Because I thought I kept seeing her name over and over again when Yrene was, like, talking. But I couldn't remember who she was.
I'm not sure.
Is she just, like, a buddy? She's just a friend?
No. She's got to be higher up, too. Because, like, I think the only other time I remember seeing her voice was Hafiza, Aricia, and Nusha were there when, after the attack. And I think that's the only other time she was mentioned. So I think she's, like, important, but I don't remember. I'm assuming she's going to come up again, and maybe we'll get some more. But anyway, she's the one that escorts him back to the palace because Yrene has a meeting with Hafiza, and he takes all the books that he took from the library with him back. When he gets to the courtyard, the guards are, like, changing over, so Shen comes over to help him, and his glove, like, I don't know if he takes his glove. I think he takes one of his gloves off, and Chaol's, like, then hesitant to get down because his arm from his, like, fingertips to his elbow is actually, like, metal and attached on.
Yeah.
Which obviously...
He's an amputee.
Yes. Which obviously Chaol didn't realize because he's always been wearing gloves. Yeah. And Chaol hesitates then to, like, use his arm to get down. And he's like, dude, I helped you every other day. Like, this is no different. Just because you didn't know.
Yeah.
So Chaol feels a bit bad about that, which, fair.
Yeah, because he, like, gets really angry
when people do that to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Shen, like, helps him like normal and then tells him he lost his arm a year and a half ago and Yrene worked on him, but as talented as she is as a healer, she can't regrow limbs. Fair. Shen then says it's taken him a while to get to this place, but he didn't do it alone. And it's kind of like something that Chaol needs to learn himself. So he's, like, thinking about all this on his way to his room, and, like, it almost seems like he's kind of, like, turning a corner for the better, and you're like, cool. But then when he gets to his room, he sees his letter to Nesryn just, like, lying on a table. He's like, shit. Yeah. Because obviously she should have read it. But then he picks it up and he sees there's one to him underneath it. And he reads it, I think it says 3 times, and he just feels like shit. And he even says that, like, in his head that he's a bastard. And he thinks, like, he used her. And he also says that, like, because her whole thing was, like, she's not holding herself to any promises and he shouldn't either. But he thinks he will hold himself to his promises. And I'm like, but he doesn't. Does he?
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure he does not hold himself to any promises in a short while.
I mean...
He gets with Yrene before she gets back.
But she also extends her stay.
Oh, so that's like, oh, she extended the stay. I can't talk to her in person before I go off with another woman and apologize for being a bastard.
Yeah, I think she's gone. She's supposed to be gone for like 3 weeks, and then she extends her stay like an extra 3 weeks or something like that. So I think her original length of her stay, he does keep to promises, even though she literally says in the note, I hold you to no promises and I keep none of my own. In other words, do what you gotta do, dude. I'm also gonna go do what I want to do.
I know.
So it's just like, why, if she's telling him, like, dude, follow your heart, essentially, why is he like, why is he being resolute in his, like, I've got to stay with her?
I just think it's dumb for him to say this and then be like, oh, she extended her stay? Fuck that. Out the window. All my promises. I can now go by what she said originally, because I don't know. I'm like, that's dumb. Why would you even say it in the first place?
Yeah.
I just wish he was like, he can be sad here. He can feel like an asshole here, but I just don't think he needed to say that he was going to stick by his promises, because he just ends up not. But anyway, not the point. We actually go to Yrene's point of view now, and it's later that afternoon, and Chaol is moody and sulking, and she's like, what the fuck happened? Because they had, like, such a great day yesterday. She feels like they're progressing. She's like, I don't understand. So she tells him that he needs to exercise, and she tries to get him to go down with the guards, but he refuses, and he's, like, clearly annoyed in general. And she asks what happened, but he refuses to tell her. And he starts to, like, do his workouts, and he goes through it twice, and then he goes to do them all a third time, and she's like, no, you need to stop. You can't just keep pushing yourself. You'll injure yourself. And he's like, I know my body. And she was, like, holding his feet while he did something, because, like, sit-ups or something. And she lets them go, and he just falls back because, like, of course.
He knows his body.
Yeah, but he's falling back because he was like, she was holding his feet down while he was doing exercises. When she let go of his feet, obviously he was going to fall back.
Yeah, I know, but it's just funny. It's like she's proving to him, like, you don't know your fucking body. Like,
but it's not because he was tired. It's because his legs don't work.
No, I know. I'm aware.
But I don't think that, yeah. I didn't take it the same way at all.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I just took it as, like, she doesn't want him to keep going, so she's like, I'm not going to be a part of this. Then she does his leg exercises with him, and when she's done, she's like, okay, now to the healing. And he's like, no, I'm too tired. I'm done for the day. And she's like, come on, we should do it. And he's like, get out. And she's like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, like, what is wrong with you? Why are you pissy?
Literally, it's so weird. Like, I can't imagine how she would feel. And it's just, like, so immature. You're like, why are you doing this? But, of course. So she actually goes to find Hussar. And Hussar is just like, oh, everyone's so busy today. Like, her father and Caution are gone to meet with the troops. And Sartaq and Captain Fleek are gone to his nest for a few weeks. And she's like, oh, what? And Hussar says that they left yesterday, and she just left a note for Chaol and one for her family, and that the, like, messenger told everybody in the palace about it. Like, he didn't know what the messages said, but he was, like, immediately like, oh, she just left and left these 2 messages. So, you know.
Yeah, a little bit, like, icky for, like, everyone's talking about his business now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yrene is, like, walking with her for a bit, and then she's like, oh, shit, I forgot to get his tea. So she goes to leave, and she's restless, and she knows she shouldn't go back, because she can't, like, if she goes back, she's going to be like, what the fuck, why didn't you tell me that Nesryn was gone, and that's why you're acting like this? So she decides to go to the slums to heal people. So she ends up healing 6 people, a woman with a growth, 3 children with fever, someone with a broken leg. And also the last person is a 16-year-old girl who was clearly beaten, and, like, she left the coloring of the bruises on her, but healed underneath, because she didn't, like, obviously want somebody to know that she was healed. The girl was afraid of,
whoever beat her obviously didn't want to show that she saw a healer.
Yeah. And she says, like, or thinks, like, she didn't tell the girl to run. She just told her that, like, if she ever needs to go somewhere, the doors to the Torre are always open for her for, like, no fee, and she could come there. She's still restless afterwards, so she actually goes towards the palace, and she gets some, like, food on the way. And by the time she gets to the palace, it's like after 11 p.m. And I'm like, this is late, man. And now she's starting to get angry. She knows like Chaol's probably asleep, but she's like ready to barge into his room again. And she thinks like he can be upset, but she's not going to let him like take a step back on his healing. And she's not going to back down. And she thinks she isn't the same girl she was in Inish. And I'm just like, could this not wait for tomorrow morning? Like, he likely is asleep. It's after 11. But then while she's walking to his room, she hears footsteps behind her. And she feels the change in the air. And a small voice that she's never heard, but that she has felt the presence of, says, hurry, in her head. And then her mother's voice says, run, Yrene. And she starts to run, obviously. And we're kind of assuming that, like, that's a goddess in her head.
But, like, they all have, like, gods and goddesses talking to them. Like, yes. Lorcan has one. Elide has one. Yrene now has one. Like, everybody just, you know, gods and goddesses talking to them left and right.
Well, I guess it's because they're, like, the main people. Like, they're being pushed towards what the gods want. So, yeah. So she starts running, and then the person behind her starts running, and she ends up, like, getting to his room and throwing herself inside, and she locks the door. She locks one lock on the door, and then it starts to rattle, and she locks another one. And the person is, like, slamming on the door, and she tells Chaol to get into his room. So they go in there, and they lock that door, and then she moves a chest in front of that door. And then she barricades, like, the glass doors to the garden. And she just thinks, like, Chaol is so calm during all of this, and he has his weapons ready, and he gives her a dagger, and he just stands there, like, watching the doors. And she asks about the bathroom, and he says, like, the windows are too high and narrow. And she's like, but what if it isn't in a human body? And I'm like, can they be in other bodies?
I don't know.
I guess, yeah, I guess they could they be, wow, could they be in a fae body that could shift, I guess. Maybe that kind of way. But I don't know if they could, like, could you go down an animal's throat? Like an animal valg?
I feel like they wouldn't want to be in an animal's body.
I know, but I don't know if this ever comes up again. I'm just like, could they... I'm thinking of them too much like demons from Supernatural. Yeah, where you can just, like, switch. But, like, how would you, like, are you going to put a ring on a dog's finger?
Oh.
On his little
You'd
paw?
have to clip a bracelet on his little paw.
Give him a collar.
Oh, my God. Oh, it was so obvious. It was staring us in the face.
It was. But, yeah, it would seem weird. Anyway. But it's just interesting. So, yeah. He's like... Oh, he says... If somebody does get in, he'll just buy her time to run. And she's like, no, you won't. But then the bedroom door starts to bang, and they hear a voice that is neither male nor female. And I'm like, how? Like, Dorian sounded like Dorian.
Yeah.
I don't really understand this.
But the Valg is probably doing that on purpose.
So they don't know who it is.
So that they, yeah.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
They can't tell.
But I'm like... Okay. And it's just, the voice is just saying her name. And Chaol asks what they want, and they just keep saying her name. And he tells them to leave, and Yrene, like, is getting really scared of this. She realizes this is definitely a Valg, and that it's hunting her, and it's the same one that, like, killed the healer the other night and was after her. So she's basically terrified, but Chaol tells her not to be because it gives this creature power over her. Mm-hmm. And he calls it a coward for hunting women in the night. And it, like, screeches at that. You're like, that's your line there? Okay. He goes over to her then and, like, holds her face, and he says that he's not afraid and she shouldn't be either, and that they will face this together. And she just nods, and he, like, fixes her grip on the dagger, and he tells her to angle it up, basically into the heart. And then he says, like, beheading works best, but, like, try to get the person thing down so that they can behead it. Then he tells her, like, together, they're gonna do this together, squeezes her hand, and then he turns around and picks up his weapons again. But there's only silence now. And then they hear guards running in, and apparently Kaja saw the broken door and went to get the guards, and right now there is nobody in the suite. So that person has disappeared.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And that's where we leave off this week, with that ending.
Yeah, it's an ending, all right.
It is. Yeah, so, like, they're not in danger anymore. I guess that's the main part. It'd be unfortunate if it was more of a cliffhanger, I guess, but it's just kind of funny. So yeah, that's it for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or on Instagram or Facebook at coffeeandcoread, and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So, next week, we are going to be reading Tower of Dawn, chapters 28 to 35, and Empire of Storms, chapter 30 to 36. So, make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.